Hello and welcome to Food Safety Live 2021. My name is Simon Timperley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network. It's our end of year bash, and this year we're doing something different. It's an Ask Me Anything. So we've got 7 expert speakers from across the globe on various topics. Just like to say before we get started, thanks to our kind sponsors, AIB, Eagle, Trace Analytics, SIA Global, Metal Toledo, DNV, and Safefood 360 for sponsoring IFSQN and Food Safety Live. We'll be playing their ads throughout in the gaps. So I'm just going to run, tell us where you're joining us from, say hello in the sidebar as you usually do. It's always great to hear from you. So we're here today for 4 hours. So we've got 7 30-minute sessions with a 5-minute break in between, which is nice. So not really a lot of slides today. It's mostly the presenter and I on webcam, and you ask the questions. I do ask if you can try and keep the questions on topic so we can get as much good content related to that topic as possible, and try and just enjoy and engage. So we'll be having Allergen Management with Amanda Evans-Lara shortly. Then we've got Food Safety Culture in ISO 22000, FSSC 22000 with Groenveld. Then Compressed Air Food Safety with Maria Sandoval, Pest Management in Food Industry with Chelle Hartzer, Driving Trust and Confidence in Food Provenance with Robin Levin and Sarah Cunningham from SAI Global, Food Safety Management Systems Software with Chris Domenico, and Risk Assessments in HACCP and HARPC with Dr. David Rosenblatt. So a nice, and it's 2 days, so 4 hours today, 4 hours tomorrow, different topics. And you get a certificate for each session, so 14 certificates, but they will be issued tomorrow. Okay, so the first session is Allergen Management with Amanda Evans-Lara from HACCP Mentor. And so over to you for your little intro, Amanda. Welcome.
Hi, Simon. How you going? Welcome, everybody, to Food Safety Live 2021. I think this is about my 7th or 8th one now, Simon, that I've participated in. So thanks again for the invitation. If you don't know me or you haven't heard of me before, I'm Amanda Evans-Lara from HACCPmentor.com. I've been around for quite some time, working in food safety compliance. Started my life as a food inspector, working for the government in Australia. And then for the last 21 odd years, I've been working as a consultant, trainer, auditor, doing all the stuff that goes with food safety compliance. And now these days I'm doing a little bit more. I do a lot of project work for BRC in their training division and some other projects with FSMA, and work as a PCQI trainer or human foods trainer, intentional adulteration trainer for FSPCA as well. So again, welcome everybody, and my topic today is going to be on allergen management. So I think I'll let you take it from there. And there's my details if anybody wanted to check out the website, or if you've got questions afterwards. I think Simon has set up a forum on the website, so you can also log your questions there. So I'll go back in and check those over the next few days. If there's any questions that didn't get answered during my session today, you can ask them there as well.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Right, ready. There's over 2,200 people registered. There's 400 and odd people online. Let's get straight into it. I'll kick the ball off. Ask your questions related to allergen management in the sidebar. First question, what is a food allergen, Amanda?
Okay, we'll start with a really easy one. So fairly straightforward. So really a food allergen can be defined as being a protein that's found in food that's really capable of triggering a response in individuals that are sensitized to it. So at this stage, the cause of food allergic disease is still not really fully understood, but there has been a general consensus around scientists and clinicians that the cause is generally linked to a combination of Western lifestyle, environment, and also your genetic predispositions as well. So that's food allergens, to wrap that up. But I think where most of the audience, if you're having to comply with GFSI or any type of legal requirement, there's requirements to identify food allergens in your foods. It's considered to be traditionally as a chemical hazard, but now we do prefer that you separate it out into its own category as allergen category.
Okay, lots of hellos, but I've not seen a question yet. And this is an Ask Me Anything, so everybody is allowed to ask. But so some of the basics.
We've got one question. We've got one
question
come in there. Yep.
Right.
Okay, let's look at, is there any standard we can refer to for the maximum allowable limits of allergens in foods? Can you please share with us a standard where we can look into? Okay, so it really depends, Jason, on whereabouts you're located. So as a general rule, your local food law will have what the levels are. Also, if you're exporting outside of your country of origin, you need to also consider the food law there as well. Now, to get a bit of an idea of what allergens are relevant in what countries, I've got a great link. I'm just going to put it, hopefully it's gone into the chat box. Simon, you'll be able to tell me if it's gone there or if I put it in the Q&A. That link actually goes to the International Food Allergen Labelling Regulations, and there's a great map there which shows kind of what allergens are relevant or declarable by law in each of the countries that they've nominated. So that's a good place to start, Jason. So again, it really just depends whereabouts you're located. A lot of countries, it'll just be nil. Will be the requirement that there is to be no, what do we say, no allergen present.
Okay,
whatsoever.
Question from...
Except for gluten. Sorry, gluten
sorry,
is the only one generally around, depending on if you're in the US. I think Canada also have an allowance for that as well. But other countries in the world, it's just zero, no detectable.
Okay. Question from Janice. What's the difference between food allergy and hypersensitivity?
Well, generally hypersensitivity is related to things like sulfite. Gluten can also fall under this side of things as well. And it's mainly an intolerance. So it's something that your body, it's not, as I said before when I was giving the definition around what a food allergen is, but it's more, you know, your body can cope with it from a sensitivity perspective, but it's not something that is related. Oh, how would you say it? To your body actually can't. You know, there's genetic malformations around particular proteins to those allergens. So sensitivities aren't something that's generally in food law. It's only just generally straightforward for food allergens.
Okay, a question from Raman. For food storage and distribution only, can a risk assessment help to not segregate allergens by type?
Well, anytime you should be doing a risk assessment, an allergen risk assessment in your business anyway. If you've got to comply with any of those GFSI standards, you do have to do an allergen risk assessment. So the type of things that you'd be looking at if you're just doing in storage and distribution is the product actually completely contained? So there's no chance that it's going to be broken and there's going to be spills or anything like that. Because we know that even if it goes on the outside of packaging, then people put the packaging on the benches, and then food might get prepared on benches and things like that. So yes, you do have to do a risk assessment. And my first part of that risk assessment would be identify everything in your business that's actually got an allergen in it. So all your raw materials, all your finished products, all your work in progress, any of your things like your pest control, your cleaning chemicals, your maintenance chemicals, all should come under that risk assessment. And when we talk about pest control, it'd be things like if you're using non-traditional methods, say you're putting peanut butter on rat traps, or you're putting cheese on mice traps, you've got to consider that type of stuff, especially if you're if you claim to be a peanut-free facility and you're using peanut butter on your rat traps. You need to consider those as well.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Question from Alok: has allergen ingestion been fatal?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's plenty of case history around that. You only have to Google peanut allergen death or something like that. There's been plenty of cases out there.
Okay. Question, and it's specific to brewing. How does one develop an allergen management plan for brewing raw materials such as malt and maize grits? But maybe you could widen that to sort of what would you expect to see in an allergen management plan
For a brewery?
For anybody.
When you're brewing?
Well, we're probably going to get asked the same question for lots of different processes. So in general, what should an allergen management plan include?
Okay, so your first thing is obviously your risk assessment, which we said first up. So that's identifying what you've got there, what you haven't got there, and then you can start looking at your procedures to prevent cross contact. Now, cross contact, it's similar to cross contamination, but cross contact is really to do with allergens. Cross contamination is to do with microbes. So from a cross contact, it's really allergen cross contact occurs when you have an allergic food or ingredient that's unintentionally incorporated into another food that's not intended to contain that allergenic food. So with that in mind, all of your procedures have to work around trying to avoid any level of cross contact from occurring. And that could be things like segregation of materials, cleaning, your cleaning equipment segregation, so not using the same cleaning equipment for allergenic areas of your business to non-allergenic areas. You can look at production scheduling, so try not to schedule allergenic products before you do a non-allergenic product, or maybe you're in a position where you can actually do separate days for running. Full allergen cleans is another strategy that you can use. Obviously training your staff. What else have we got there? I'm just going off the top of my head. Let me think. Feel free to jump in, Simon, if I've missed any. Yep. So your full allergen cleans. So remember that doing allergen testing is really only a verification of cleaning or the present, so it shouldn't be relied on as a control measure. Doing testing is really just a verification methodology that your cleaning has been effective. Now, thing with cleaning, you need to make sure that you are cleaning in areas where the allergen could possibly get caught. So if you've got hang up in equipment, if you've got closed systems, it's very hard to do testing obviously within a closed system. So don't just rely on doing allergen swabs in areas that you can see are clean, because you're always going to get you're going to get the result that you want, but it may not be a true representation of what's going on in your factory.
Exactly. On verification, Vladimir, who's going to be presenting later, can you provide some examples or an example of allergen management verification in production?
Yep. Okay, so there is with visual, like a visual inspection of cleaning. So if you can, I always live by the notion of if you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't feel it. That's my definition of clean. So before you go to the next level of, say, doing allergen swabbing, don't waste your money on allergen swabbing if your place is not visually clean. That's my first point. You then go to your allergen swabbing. Now, a lot of people will use what we call ATP swabs and believe that that is okay as a mechanism for identifying allergens. Now, you need to keep in mind that ATP test kits are less sensitive than actually using allergen swab tests. So because ATP, it will detect sources from animal, vegetable, microorganisms, food protein residues, things like that. And they're really just to be used for a general indicator for sanitation. Where your ATP swab kits and your protein swabs generally indicate just general hygiene. So they're not specific for allergen residue and they're not representative of allergen load. So if you want to get a little bit more accuracy around whether a particular allergen is present, you'll need to use or have testing done on your swabs for that target allergen that you are looking to make sure is not present in your product. So that's going to be one of your main, let's say cleaning's your main thing to make sure you're visually looking to see it's clean. Then doing your allergen swabs. You can then also do allergen testing on the finished product. Now, if you want to know what allergen for what product, you need to just talk to your local laboratory because there's a lot of different test methods that can be used. Lab may use an ELISA method, or they may be a little bit more detailed and go into DNA testing as well. But depending on the product, not all products are easy to test for allergens. So I always advise talk to your local laboratory and get their advisory on which test method is going to be applicable for the test that for the product that you're actually producing. And also knowing what your target allergens are that you want to get tested as well.
And should that lab be accredited?
Oh, absolutely. Any of that type of stuff.
Is it 17025? ISO 17025.
Something like that. 170 something.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next one from Helmer. FDA is adding sesame to its allergen list. Do I have to declare sesame in my finished product if one of the raw materials contains it in a non-intentional way?
Well, if it's non-intentional, so hang on. If it's not intentional, but you know it's there, you need to declare it. So I'm going to take a guess of you may have been told by your supplier that the product may contain sesame. So it really comes back to precautionary labeling and what the requirements are legally in your country of origin and your country of export. So for example, in Australia, we have laws now around standardised precautionary labelling, and you have to do validated risk assessments on a system, what we call VITAL, VITAL. It's managed by the Allergen Bureau, which is an international organisation. So that test method will then tell you, okay, you do all your, based on your recipe and your production, it will give you a result at the end to say how much allergen is in your finished product based on what the supplier's told you. So if the supplier said to you the product may contain sesame, I would be asking them, well, how much does it contain?
Okay, thanks. Going back to allergen management and risk assessment, HACCP, question from Maria. With the new Codex 2020, is allergen management a critical control point?
Well, one of my favourite questions when people ask me, are certain things critical control points? the only way you can determine a critical control point is if you actually do a hazard analysis first. So it may be for your business, it may not be for another business. So there's no such thing as just saying this is a critical control point. You actually have to assess it yourself for your business situation, your product, your process through your hazard analysis. And when you do your hazard analysis correctly, that should lead you to the answer of should it be a allergen CCP or not. Now, in saying that, FDA under FSMA Human Foods Rule, they do talk about allergen preventive controls, but again, you don't just get to an allergen preventive control by magic. You actually have to go through the hazard analysis process to be able to decide on whether it is a allergen preventive control. Same with the CCP.
Okay, thank you.
And also just Maria on that too. So Codex 2020, but there is also, and I encourage everybody to go and have a look at this as well, is the Code of Practice on Allergen Management for Food Business Operators, which was put out by Codex as well back in 2020. So take a look at that as well.
Okay. Moving into allergens in restaurants, how should a restaurant declare allergens where wheat, celery, mustard are the ingredients in a recipe?
Again, it comes back to whereabouts you're located, but and what your local law says. So some common things that I've seen is people will have in retail a bit like a product specifications sheet that we have in manufacturing. So if a customer asks, does this product have mustard, celery, or whatever in it, the server can, or the waiter or waitress can refer to the product spec to be able to tell the person who's asking what is actually in the product. So you should be putting all of that stuff together for each of the products that you produce. And you don't want to just do that, our product contains every single allergen, because that really stops people being able to eat at your place who suffer from allergies. You shouldn't be using that blanket as an excuse for not actually cleaning properly or managing the allergens within your business.
Yeah. Perfect. Anika, are there any industry practice where secondary or primary packaging is swab tested for allergen cross-contamination for finished products, goods in final packaging? The risk in packaging compared to food?
Well, again, you would be going back to the specification from the packaging supplier to see what's in there.
Yeah.
And whether they've used something in their product. There's another good resource too. Again, if you Google Allergen Bureau, foods with, I think it's like undeclared, or foods that you wouldn't think had allergens in them. It's just that so you can get a bit more familiar with foods that don't actually have the allergen in their name, like egg, wheat. So it'd be things like if it had, let me think, vinegar. So some vinegar can be based on wheat. So it's a good little resource. I'll get it later on and I'll put it in the chat. Actually, I'll put it in the forum so people can access after the course.
Great. Another question from Anika. Can you speak about any specific testing kits? What do they look like? Are they different for different allergens or? Well,
again, a ELISA kit, if you were going to do your own in-house testing, ELISA kit's probably the most common type. But again, you just got to check, not all kits are available for all types of allergens. And this is the same with when you're using or you're contracting a third-party laboratory. You need to see or make sure that that laboratory is accredited to do the test for that particular allergen. So again, it really just depends where you're located and what your laboratories have locally. But a good place to start is ask the right questions of the laboratory, as in, what allergens can you test for? What products that contain the allergens can you test for? What methods do you use? And then you can go from there. Our allergen training does go a lot deeper into the different types of testing, PCR testing, ELISA, the DNA as well. So.
Okay. A question from Anna. If a supplier does not have any allergens, would it be acceptable for them to say they do not have a validated allergen control program to prevent cross-contamination if there's categorically no allergens?
Yeah, so if, again, you've got to show through risk assessment that you don't have any allergens, so you can't just come out and say we have no allergens. You still have to have the paperwork to back up that you've actually done the assessment and shown that you do not have any allergens. And don't forget to include maintenance lubricants, because sometimes a lot of those can be based on soy as well. So that, checking your vending machines, you're checking what people are bringing from home as well in their lunches. So I think it's quite bold to say that we have no allergens in our facility when you need to consider all of those other aspects, not just your raw materials.
It's the kind of thing that happens during, let's say, a third-party audit. Oh, we don't have any allergens, and then an employee walks past eating a Snickers bar.
Yes, yes.
With their overalls on, or something
that's
like
it.
that.
I've actually seen peanuts, Nobby's peanuts in
Do you want
vending
a peanut?
machine. Yes. Well, we're a peanut-free factory, and there was peanuts in the vending machine.
Okay. Let's see this question. Sometimes, where are we? Quickly. Sometimes a guest got allergic reaction to a certain ingredient of a food, what we've used on a regular basis. I don't quite understand that question.
Don't want that one.
In the EU, can you measure absence of gluten? That's quite specific from Johan.
Yep. Again, it depends on the laboratory and the test methods that they're using. So a lot of them will just be to a detectable limit. So they might say not detected in 10 milligrams of product or 10 pp, something like that. Again, you'll have to just discuss this with your laboratory.
Okay, this is going to have to be the last question because we've actually...
No, it's gone pretty quick.
Unbelievably quick. From Carolina, what do you think will be the implications for the legislation of the countries of the conclusions of the expert meeting convened by FAO, who in 2021 on the list of the main allergens?
Well, it will be interesting whether they just stick with the top 8, which is now, when we talk about the big 8 allergens, that's really a US-based thing. Now US have brought in sesame, so it goes to 9. But in that particular, the documentation around that for that organisation or that group, they do talk about the top 8 because they're the most likely to cause allergic reaction in people. So.
Right, Amanda, short but sweet. Thanks for joining us from Melbourne, Australia.
Sydney? From Newcastle.
Oh, Newcastle.
Newcastle, Australia, 2 hours north of Sydney.
2 hours north of Sydney. So have a nice evening, the rest of your evening. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Thank you. And will all these questions go into the forum?
I've just put in the sidebar now a link to your topic on the discussion forum. Everybody who didn't get the question answered, go and post your question on there and Amanda will follow up. Okay, brilliant. Excellent. Thanks very much, Amanda.
Thanks, Simon. Bye, everybody. Have a good conference.
Right, we'll be back shortly with Core Groenveld, Food Safety Culture in ISO 22000 and FSSC 22000. But first, a word from our sponsors. can you just switch your webcam and mic off, please?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Just switch your webcam and mic off, Cole. We'll come to you after the adverts, okay?
The world of food has changed a lot in the last 100 years. But one thing that doesn't change? Ensuring the quality and safe handling of food. No matter what changes are yet to come, we're proud to always be on our clients' side, shaping the future of food today and tomorrow. AIB International, ever onward.
Next up is food safety culture in ISO 22000 and FSSC 22000 with Cor Groenveld from FSSC 22000. Are you there, Cor? If you are, please switch your webcam and mic on.
Hey. Yes, I'm here. How are you doing, Simon? Everything okay?
Yeah, good to see you. Okay, so if you want to do your little introduction, then we'll get straight into the Q&A. Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. It's great to be in this session again and supporting IFSQN. Very shortly, I also like you to have this as a background and as a reference. But FSSC 20000, you most likely know it, a certification program for food safety management systems based on ISO standards. And what is for us very important is that we as a non-profit foundation, we like to support the food supply chain to continuously improve food safety. We cover almost the whole food supply chain. I think that is good, like ISO 20000. We have an international, we are an international team. These are our representatives in several countries. If you are in one of these countries or regions, you can reach out to us, but you can also come directly to us, of course, to the office. And I think what's typical of FSSC 20000, and that relates also with food safety culture, where I will talk a little bit more about and answer all of your great questions. I know you will have them. Is that ISO 20000 is the standard we use, and that already covers food safety culture since the start, since the revision 2018. So I think that is a big benefit of the standard. Next to ISO 20000, we use technical specifications. There are technical specifications that are made for different sectors, and each of these sectors need to meet those technical specifications on the prerequisite programs. And then we have some additional requirements on top of that. And this is a lot of information. You can find it on the website, but I think most important is at the moment, we are now already 11 years young, but we have more than 26,000 certificates around the world. And we work with our partners, the certification bodies and training organizations. And on the right side, you see the scope of FSSC. It's almost from farm to fork. All organizations that are in the scope can use our program. So that is in short, I think, an introduction on FSSC, Simon. For people who might not know us yet, please go to the website or contact us directly.
Impressive growth indeed in 10 years. Amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It is truly. And I'm going to ask you a wide open question first.
Please.
What is food safety culture?
Yeah. It's difficult. Well, food safety culture, there's a lot of literature on it. There's a lot of documentation on it. We are following the food safety culture as defined by the Global Food Safety Initiative. Most of you will probably know the Global Food Safety Initiative. That's the great organization where retailers and manufacturers and food service organizations, but also the certification bodies and scheme owners like us come together. And it's a huge society for the food supply chain. And they decided in their requirements for the certification programs that they have approved, they decided that all the certification programs had to implement food safety culture in their standards. And that happened in the version of 2020. And they have a definition of food safety, Simon, and I think that definition is quite good. It says it are the shared values, beliefs, and norms that affect mindset and behavior towards food safety in, across, and throughout an organization. And I think that that definition shows it is about values, beliefs, and norms. So first you have to set the norms and the beliefs. So an organization should start what they expect from their people, what they expect from the organization, and from their suppliers also. That is the starting point. And then, of course, you have to ensure you get it into the mindset and behavior of everyone who is working in the organization, but also your suppliers, and that's all related to food safety. And I think that explains what it is. But yeah, it is not easy. It's really a challenge for organizations to ensure that the food safety culture is defined in the right way and implemented and measured that it works. And that is even more difficult to find measurable, tangible characteristics or parameters to measure that food safety culture really works in the organization. That is, I think, the biggest challenge.
That's excellent. And funny you should say that, because the first question is from BG Ravikumar. How do we measure that food safety culture is effective?
I can understand that question. And yeah, again, we see food safety culture being a little bit soft. It's a little bit soft. But if you really think about it, and each organization has to do it for itself, because each organization is unique, I think there are possibilities to find measurable characteristics or parameters to see that first the food safety culture is implemented. I think that's your starting point. So you have to look if you have if you have rules in your organization to say, listen, we want to implement certain procedures, we want to implement certain values for our suppliers, make sure that you first measure that you have implemented all of these characteristics of the food safety culture. And then, of course, you have to see that they are working in practice. And that working in practice is, I think, more a challenge. But I give examples because I cannot give the answer. I'm not a consultant. I work for FSSC. But you can look, for instance, at your customer complaints. And sometimes you can look at customer complaints and try to do your root cause analysis, because that is what you need to do. Why did we have a complaint? And can we find a relationship with food safety culture? Was this caused by behavior or things that can be also caused by food safety culture? So that's a way to look at, for instance, non-conformities. That can be a non-conformity for a customer complaint, can be a non-conformity in internal audit, can be a non-conformity because you have products that are not meeting the quality. But try to do that analysis on your non-conformities if you see a relationship with food safety culture. And then, of course, when you do that and you analyze it and you measure it, you can also see if you improve yourself. Because after your root cause analysis, you have to do your corrective action. And then, of course, you try to reduce those non-conformities, and especially in this case related with food safety culture. Other ways is doing surveys. Now you can do a personnel survey. You can do a survey under your personnel to see if they understand the food safety culture, what kind of behavior is expected from them, what kind of mindset, and also look at that if you see improvement on that. So I think you have to look at your own organization, at your own processes, and really try to identify what did I agree with our organization on food safety culture, and how can I measure that it's implemented and that it's working, that it's effective. A few examples, Simon. I cannot give the full solution.
That's very good. And it leads on to a question from Justice that's asking about auditing. That's the next step. You know, if you've put your policies, procedures, etc., controls in place, then you measure and then you audit as well. That's part and parcel. Okay, records from Gulam. What records should be maintained in evidence? What would an auditor be looking for? Same?
Yeah, well, if you look at, I think it's good to understand a little bit how GFSI defined what are the elements of food safety culture. And they identified 4 elements. The first element is you need to ensure that you have good communication. You have to ensure that you have a good training. You have to ensure that you have a process to get feedback from your employees. You start with food safety culture, I say always top down. You need to implement that mindset, the norms, the beliefs, that's more the top down. But you also want to have to bottom up. You want to give your employees the possibility to give feedback, that they are willing to report if things go wrong. If you have an organization based on fear, then it's not the real way to have a good food safety culture. You have to stimulate and award people that they are willing to report that things went wrong, and that is, I think, the mindset you need to ensure. And the fourth element is measurement, the effectiveness, to see if it really works. So these are the 4 elements that are defined by the GFSI, and you find it also in FSSC in our standards. So records that you need is always related by those 4 elements. So you need to make sure that you have records in place. If you do your communication, what kind of communication are you doing? Are you doing only on the highest level of the organization, the management team? Well, that's not enough. You also need to have your communication with other layers of your organization. Make sure that you inform your associates about how things are going. Tell them what went well, but also tell them what did not went well, and try to get that improvement process ongoing on things that are not going well. And that is really working on food safety culture. Have also records on reporting. Sometimes perhaps people need to be able to have confidential reporting. There should be perhaps a process in place that people can report something confidential, because it is very sensitive to report things. But make sure you have that in place. So records always related to those 4 elements, and make sure, of course, that you have those records in place and that you store them well, and that you have them available for audits. And I think for an auditor, it's important to look at those records. I've been an auditor for a long time, Simon, and my trainers always to me, Cor, you can believe brown and blue eyes, but please also ask them to show the evidence. So but that is, I think, what an auditor also, records are the evidence in the end that things have gone well and are implemented. For sure.
A question from Lupita. Food safety culture is not a requirement per se in FSSC 22000. Does a certified company have to do something specific for food safety culture?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and Lupita is very well informed on FSSC 22000. So thank you for the question. When GFSI came with the requirement to implement food safety culture in our standards, we looked at our standard because we use ISO 22000. And GFSI has a position paper, and you find there what they call guiding questions. So it's a big list of questions related to those 4 elements I just said. And these are the things that need to be implemented according to GFSI to have a good food safety culture process in place. So we looked into ISO 22000 if these requirements were already covered. And the good news, yes, they were. So in the 2018 version of ISO 22000, all these requirements from GFSI are already covered. But as Lupita says, there is not a chapter called food safety culture. That chapter is not there. I don't know, perhaps they forgot it or they thought it's not necessary, but the requirements are there. But the requirements are spread over several chapters of ISO 22000. And then we said, yeah, now it can become a little bit difficult for the users to understand where food safety culture is covered. So what we did, we made a guidance document. So we have a guidance document, and you can download it for free. It's a nice document. I have it here, but you find it on our website, and it shows the requirements for food safety culture. It shows for each requirement in which clause of ISO 22000 it's covered, and then it also states that clause, and it gives guidance to the auditor how to audit it. So it's really a very nice document for the certification bodies, of course, who need to look at implementation of food safety culture at certified organizations, but also for organizations themselves to implement the food safety requirements. It's a very nice document to use. And also for internal auditors, you can also use this document to do your internal audit. So I recommend you to download for free that guidance document, and you can use it for food safety culture implementation and effectiveness.
Yeah, whether you're FSSC 22000 certified or you want to be or not, it'll provide you with some guidelines and overview of what's expected to deliver a positive and improving food safety culture.
Yeah. And it's only 7 pages, so it's not a big document, small letter, I have to say, but it's a good content.
Very good. Did you write that, Cor?
No, my technical team, they are much better in that.
Okay, question from Anika. Can you please explain the difference between food safety and food quality?
Oh, wow.
It's a bit
it's a good question. I think there are different ways to explain that, but in principle, also when you look at standards and you look at ISO and you look at FSSC, if you look at food quality, quality is broader than food safety. I think when you say food quality, that can include food safety, because if the quality of if the food safety is not in order, the quality is also not in order. Eh? But if you look at food safety specifically, that's all related to food safety hazards and the possibility that people get sick, people get injured, and even people die. And that is the real typical thing of food safety. Quality has more attributes. Quality can also be the wrong color or the wrong packaging, or it can be something related to the taste of a product. So there's nothing related then with injuries or illnesses or that kind of things, but it's still wrong. The product is not good. If you look at management systems, that's a little bit different way to look at it. We know food safety management systems, and we know also food quality management systems. And if you look at ISO 9001, that's the standard for quality management systems. And if you look at ISO 22000, that's the standard for food safety management systems. And that is used by FSSC because FSSC is a truly food safety management system certification program. You can integrate it. That's, I think, the future, to have integrated management systems, that you are not covering only food safety, but also quality, perhaps also sustainability or environmental elements. And then you work on an integrated management system. And we started with that. We have what we call FSSC quality. And that's possible for organizations to integrate ISO 9001 in their food safety management system. And then they have a quality management system and food safety management system in one. I hope that explains this good question.
Perfect. Question from Somyadip. Would you please enlighten the key major differences of FSSC 22000 and ISO 22000 2018?
Yeah, these questions differentiate a little bit from food safety culture, but it's great questions, so I'm happy to answer them, Simon. There is a clear difference. First of all, FSSC 22000 is GFSI recognized. FSSC 22000 is recognized by the Global Food Safety Initiative. There are more certification programs recognized. And the GFSI, the Global Food Safety Initiative, started 20 years ago by doing a benchmark, a gap analysis and a benchmark against requirements of certification programs. And those requirements we need to meet. And then retailers and manufacturers and other food service organizations, a lot of them then accept the certificate. So it's a kind of a benchmark approval recognition system for certification programs. And ISO 20000 on its own is not recognized because there are a few requirements from the GFSI that ISO 20000 on its own does not meet. What we did, we use ISO 20000. So ISO 20000 is a full requirement for FSSC 22000, but we also require those technical specifications for the prerequisite programs. And they are much more specific for each sector. And that is a requirement from GFSI. You need to have more specific requirements for the prerequisite program. So that's how we implemented that requirement. And GFSI requires that there is a legal owner of the program. So we are the legal owner. We are a non-profit foundation, but we own the certification program. And we also have requirements for the certification bodies. So that is not involved in ISO 22000 itself on its own. So these are a few differences. The biggest difference is the use of that technical specification and our additional requirements, and also that recognition from the Global Food Safety Initiative.
Okay, thank you. Question from Zishembiso. Should one have internal food safety culture audit?
This is a beautiful name. Difficult to pronounce, but a beautiful name.
I tried.
And again, a very good question. Well, I would put it different. You do not need a separate internal food safety culture audit. That's not required. You need to audit food safety culture in your internal audits, but you can integrate it. If you want, you can just have an internal audit, because an internal audit, if you look at ISO 22000 and FSSC, will be focused on processes. So if you audit the process, you look at different aspects. And one of the aspects can be the food safety culture aspect. So you can look at what are the requirements on food safety culture, what are those norms, beliefs that I talked about, what is the expected behavior and mindset, and you can use that in your internal audit to test it, to audit it in a process or in your interview. And then you integrate it in your internal audit system. That I would recommend that. You can do it separately, no one will forbid it, but it might be more effective to integrate it in your internal audit system. At least you need to audit it. That is absolutely a requirement. You need to audit food safety culture.
Okay, it's a very deep one. I think you're going to like this one, Cor. Francois, wow. Can we say that, like for love, there is no safety culture, there is only proof of safety culture?
Wow, I need to read this. Like for love, there is no safety culture, is only proof. Help me a little bit, Simon.
Yeah, it's deep. So, in other words, the proof of all food safety culture is hard to pin down. It's the output, the outcome of everything. You know, if you've got satisfied employees, satisfied customers, satisfied suppliers, the defects are zero, the company's booming, it must have a good food safety culture.
Yeah, well, you could say it, of course. I think there will be a relationship. What I always say, listen, if you have the best processes in place, the best machines, the nicest factory, the best raw materials, but you don't have happy people, I think you have nothing. So employee satisfaction is crucial to have a good food safety culture and to produce good foods. So in the end, it will pay back. It will pay back. If your people are happy, they do 10 steps extra for you. That is the case, and that's why that employee satisfaction, that ensuring that there is no management by fear, but that people are okay in reporting issues, and that they together work on continuous improvement, involve people in improvement projects. They will like it. You need to train them, perhaps. You need to. Training is so critical. Food safety culture. if you don't have a good training, you will not have competent people. But take them along, and you will see that your people are capable to much more than a lot of organizations think they are. But they like to be respected, they like to be awarded, and it's not only with money, it can be a lot of other things, but make sure you have that mindset and behavior in your organization.
Okay, good. Okay, BG Ravikumar, how do we motivate senior management and educate them regarding food safety culture?
Yeah, that's nice. That we need to motivate senior management there. Yeah, it's good. It's very good. And yeah, I think it starts with senior management. I mean, it starts with the CEO. It starts on the highest level of an organization. If there is no commitment, no engagement for food safety culture, you have an issue. If you look at ISO 22000, there is a chapter about leadership. Chapter 5. That's a huge chapter in ISO 22000, and it's called leadership. That in the old version it was not called leadership, and I like that title because it shows how important it is that not only top management but every layer of the organization you need to have leaders. You need to have people who are able to show the right examples, to show the right behavior, and to coach and guide their employees to the right results. And if it doesn't start with senior management, it will almost be impossible to have a right food safety culture. If you as employees think that you can have improvements on food safety culture, I hope that you have the possibility to have that reporting, that you can give that input to your senior management, and that they're open for improvements. If they're not, then it's difficult, Simon. It's difficult then to change the organization. So CEOs, management teams, top of the organization, they are in the lead, I think, to have that food safety culture in place.
Yeah. Somebody asked for the link to the guidance document, but Lupita kindly put it in the sidebar, which is great. Thanks so much for your help.
Oh, super. We see a link. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the chat side. So, Amna, if we want to have a whistleblower, I don't like the sound of it, but you know, how can you choose him and to whom he reports to encourage food safety? In my opinion, if it's worth anything, everybody should be a whistleblower. Everybody should. That's the culture.
Yeah. The name has a negative impact, I think. But I agree with you, and that again, it starts with senior management. So we need to ensure that everyone is motivated to report any issues that are happening in the organization. What can be, and that's, I said it in the beginning, that we talk about whistleblower procedure. That is common terminology. And what is meant is that you need to have something in place that people can report it in confidence. And that is, I think, what is very important, that you have that in place. And there are sometimes professional organizations that are being used by food organizations. So they subcontract it to a professional organization. That's possible. There are organizations that can do it. But it can also be someone in your organization at human resource. That you have someone in human resource that is not directly connected with the processes, but has that role where you can report things confidential. Because you need to be open with it. There can be situations that perhaps your own manager that you report to is involved, and then it can be, of course, very sensitive for people to report certain things. So I think you need to have that in place, but I agree with you. You need to motivate that people are not in fear, that they are willing and motivated to report any issues in the organizations, and that is taken positively. Yeah.
Okay. Saga, was there any public consultation done while incorporating food safety culture requirements into FSSC 22000 standard?
Yeah, it was not needed, because we didn't need to change anything, because all the requirements were already in the ISO 22000. So we did not need to change anything in FSSC 22000. The only thing we did was a gap analysis against those GFSI food safety culture requirements and ISO 22000, And that guidance document tells where you can find the requirements in the ISO 22000. So I think ISO 22000 did a great job, and they covered already in 2018 all the food safety culture requirements that are now asked by the GFSI.
Okay, Zulkarnain, why should we implement FSC 22000 if we've already implemented ISO 22000?
Well, I think the reasons I tried to explain already. I think ISO 22000 on its own is not recognized by the Global Food Safety Initiative. And if you supply your products to organizations that require a GFSI recognized certification, then I would say it's better to go to FSSC, because FSSC is recognized. So it depends also who are your clients, to who do you supply. But many retailers and many big manufacturers and even food service organizations, catering organizations, they require that their suppliers have a GFSI, a Global Food Safety Initiative, recognized certificate. And then ISO 20000 is not enough. Then you would go for FSSC. It's relatively easy to do a transition from ISO 20000 to FSSC, because you have already implemented ISO 20000 fully. So that's a great start. The only thing you need to add is that technical specification on prerequisite programs, but most of it you will already have implemented. You just need to check what you eventually miss, and we have some additional requirements. So I would then say, yeah, if you need that recognition from GFSI, then I would say you better go for FSSC 22000.
Okay, we're getting close to time, but question from Alan. Given the increased global trade, how do we ensure that we include assessments of food safety culture at country level, food safety regulatory level? I say so because I believe culture is also shaped at national level.
Yeah, I think so, and there will be differences in countries. I think the good thing on the GFSI recognition and the fact that GFSI set a standard for food safety culture for all those recognized certification programs is that we are harmonized now, because all the GFSI recognized programs, they need to implement the same requirements on food safety culture. So that is not national organized now. So it doesn't matter if you use FSSC 22000 or one of the others. We all have implemented the same requirements dictated or set by GFSI. And I think that's good. That gives an harmonized approach on the minimum requirements for food safety culture. You can always have more requirements. The GFSI always say, listen, this is the minimum. If you want to have more requirements in place, that's a free choice. And that's up to each certification program themselves. But I think we have a positive, harmonized approach on implementing the minimum requirements for food safety culture.
Brilliant. And we're going to have to call it a day there, Cor.
Pity, Simon.
In the sidebar, I've put now in the chat a link to the IFSQN discussion forum. So if people who didn't have their question answered, apologize, we've got 600 odd people online. So if you go there, just post your question, and maybe Cor or somebody else from the discussion forum, we can create some further dialogue on food safety culture. So thanks so much for your time today, Cor.
And Simon, last remark, people can go to the website and they can get our newsletter. We have a newsletter, it's for free, and we often have good topics also on food safety culture, so you can subscribe for a newsletter on our website.
Thanks, Cor. Have a great day.
Thank you, Simon. I loved it. Thank you.
It's great. Okay, I'm going to play the video ads now from the sponsors. We'll be back soon. I have no idea what's going on. Hello, Maria. How are you doing?
Hi, Simon. I'm doing well.
Shall we put your slides on? Were those video ads all messed up? Or
Oh,
they were,
no.
weren't they? No.
I know
don't
some
know.
of them stuttered, but not bad.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's kick this off. So the next session is compressed air food safety with Maria Sandoval, who you've just spotted there from Trace Analytics. And Maria's going to tell us a little bit about Trace, and then we'll get on with the Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Simon. Let's see. Okay. So today I'm just going to be answering some of your questions regarding compressed air quality and food safety. We are an A2LA accredited lab, just ISO 17025-2017. We specialize in compressed air testing. We specialize in environmental testing for microbiology. We can do gaseous contaminants and things like that. So a little bit about me. I've been around microbiology and cellular and molecular biology for over 15 years. I started off looking at extremophiles in Lake Baikal and 50-kilometer exclusion zone of Chernobyl. And then I moved on to the Department of Health here in Texas, analyzing and diagnosing patient microflora. And then from there, I went to UTMD Anderson and focused on basic research of carcinogenesis. And then when I heard that Trace Analytics was opening up a microbiology lab, I thought it was really interesting. We can talk a little bit about that, but ISO 8573, which is the international standard for compressed air, has a section for microbiology. And a lot of people don't quite understand the nuances of micro, and that, you know, it's a microorganism's job to want to infiltrate whatever environment that they're in. And so that's why Trace Analytics found it so important to start up their own accredited microbiology lab and really help out their customers there in real time. So I've been the lab director here for a few years now, and I'm sitting as the project leader for ISO 8573 Part 7, as well as A3 and the NFPA board. And so we've been doing this for about 30 years, compressed air testing, specifically breathing air testing. In the last decade or so, we've moved into ISO manufacturing testing, and all of that can be done for food safety. We really harp on superior customer service here, and that is why we utilize IFSQN to help you guys out and be a part of your blog. So with that, I'll go ahead and start taking any of your questions.
Okay, super. Just to say, everybody, that it is being recorded today, and you can access the recording. You can switch your webcam on, Maria. It is being recorded, and the 2 days, it's 4 hours today, 4 hours tomorrow, and there will be a certificate of attendance for everybody each session. So you'll get 14 certificates. Okay, let's get on to the questions. First one from Chizak. How can we monitor for purity of compressed air use in a manufacturing process?
So ISO 8573 is an international standard that is built specifically for compressed air testing. And there are 9 parts of the section. Part 1 talks about contaminants and purity classes. And what it discusses there is not only how to test, but your limits to test. So you'll learn in that, you'll learn in this protocol the purity classes. And so if you're concerned for your food facility or manufacturing facility about particulates, then it'll give you an idea of what class you should test to. Now that's part 1. Part 2 through 9 are the methodologies. And so I encourage anybody who's building their testing methodology right now or revamping their quality protocols to look at ISO 8573 and use that as the backbone to your quality system for looking at food safety in compressed air.
Okay, super. Question from BG Ravikumar. Liquid nitrogen, carbon dioxide use in food processing. What safety aspects should be monitored? You're
So that's all really part of the same vein. So I want to stress that 8573, ISO 8573, is a compressed air standard. But just like you mentioned, a lot of the other standards like BRC or SQF or any of those food safety quality FMSA are all talking about monitoring any of the modified atmospheric gases or any of the other gases that you guys are using in the food industry. So if you're going to do that, again, another great backbone is to use ISO 8573. You'll want to get with an expert to make sure that you are looking at something that is relevant, because you're talking about air versus an inert gas like oxygen or hydrogen or even CO2 or liquid nitrogen. But all of those things have the potential to clog up your distribution piping. And if that is ever a case, then you need to be monitoring for any of the rust issues, particulate issues. With CO2, we can do anaerobic microbial testing, right? So the difference between aerobic and anaerobic is aerobes grow in the presence of oxygen. If you have a CO2 line, then you have no oxygen in your line, and therefore you need to be sampling for anaerobic organismal growth or facultative anaerobes, which is an organism that can grow in the presence of oxygen or the absence of oxygen. And I wish I could tell you that it's CO2, it's high pressure, it doesn't matter. But what we're seeing in real time from real facilities like yours is that there is indeed the potential for microbial growth, for rust particles, for oils, aerosols, and water contamination, not only in air, but in nitrous oxides, in carbon dioxide, things like that.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Yvette, our compressed air system is closed and does not have direct contact with products. Is testing compressed air required in this situation?
So that's a really good question. If you adhere to SQF, there's a new clause in Code 9 that talks about the need to do a risk assessment and then monitor your compressed air use depending on your risk assessment, depending on the type of contact that your compressed air system that's a part of your compressed air system contact system. So if it is indirect, then you may find that it is low risk and you don't need to necessarily monitor on a quarterly basis. If you find that it's a high risk and then you do have direct contact, that's not to say your case, but you may find that you need to do more quarterly contact. But in this case, if it's a closed system, you're not having direct contact to your final product or to a prior kill step, then you might find that based on your risk assessment, you only need to monitor annually. But it is definitely recommended that if it's used in any sort of your process, you monitor it.
And sometimes you find that it's not used, but well, we do use it to blow down machines. Or
I think one of the most interesting things that people forget is there was a famous ice cream facility that was blowing their floors with compressed air, and you don't think that's not in direct contact at all, but the organisms were in the drain pipes on the floor, And the act of blowing the air on the floor drain pipes was resuspending those organisms, and then they were landing on the production line. So they were cross-contaminating. So you really want to think outside the box when you're doing a risk assessment.
And on that point, because that's the next question, actually, a question from Justice: how would one put together a risk assessment for compressed air in a food facility?
Yeah, so you really want to, there's a couple things you can do. So on our website, if you need one today, on our website, we have a risk assessment guide that you can give us a call and we can get you into. But if you don't have that, potentially, I assume you have a quality system already. And if you have a quality system, you should have an SOP for a risk assessment. That should be mandatory for all quality systems in a food facility. And so when you start there, I would say use SQF or BRC, any number one of these backbone standards, to start asking the questions about how you're using your compressed air system. And so you really want to go stepwise. Is it touching my product directly? If the answer is no, then say, okay, is it touching it indirectly? Is what it's touching indirectly going to be in direct contact with the final product? And so on and so forth. You can talk about temperature. Is the air coming from your compressor hot? Is it cold? Is your filtration, is it inside the building, outside the building? Do you have a dryer? Do you not have a dryer? A lot of those things are going to influence the quality of compressed air that you have. And you really, really, really need to ask those questions.
Okay. There's a couple of questions there from Liu regarding specifications. Can you speak to, specifications for, what should we be looking at? Where are the sources?
So are there any microbiology specifications for passive air? Yeah, absolutely. So this is the thing that's a little complicated about compressed air. I think we forget that it's the fourth utility in the world. You have electricity as an example of utility, and then there's compressed air. And there are not that many specified compressed air specs out there. 8573 is the number one compressed air specification, but hidden inside the bajillion amounts of specifications that ISO has is 14698. And 14698 is a clean room spec, but inside of it, if you read, it says that it can be used for compressed air and compressed gases. And so that's the specification you want to go to when you're looking at microbiological specifications inside of compressed air. And so from there, they have purity specs for clean rooms. Now, a lot of people can't make the correlation between a clean room and their actual facility. That's okay. What you can do is pull the information out of ISO 14698-1, and you can use that as a backbone to build for passive air exposure testing and microbiology in a food facility.
Super. And ISO 8573, is it paid for or is it freely available just to buy
so, like most of the 8573, like most of the ISO specifications, you do have to pay for it. But if you give Trace a call, we have a fleet of customer service individuals who can help you navigate the system and answer a lot of your questions regarding that spec or 14698.
Okay, and the question from Janos: do Trace service other markets other than the US?
Yes, we do. We are available internationally. So if you have any questions regarding sampling, we can definitely help you out there.
Okay, and Helmut, are the risks the same for compressed air as for air from a blower, not high pressure?
So I imagine air from a blower does not come from a compressed distribution piping system. I could be wrong. So, there's that. But I will say compressed air is typically under pressure. I'm not sure about blowers. That's something that we can look into. But yeah.
Okay, I'd wrote down a question. Where should you be testing within a facility regarding compressed air?
So that really goes back into your risk assessment. And, I know, Simon, you and I have done a number of webinars so far, and it's funny because I always feel bad saying, well, just look at your risk assessment, but it's true. There are a lot of facilities, and within all of these facilities, there's just a number of differences that matter. And so when you're talking about zoning, so that's really the key word you want to look up when you're trying to create a zoning map for monitoring. You really want to ask questions from your risk assessment regarding how often you should sample a certain zone, how many people go around that zone, what is the purpose of that area, is it high risk, low risk, things like that. But what you're referring to is called zoning, and that is part of a quality map, essentially, when you're creating a monitoring program.
Okay. Another question from Helmut. Is there a microbiological risk in compressed air? If so, which ones? We currently have molds identified in our risk analysis, but are molds a food safety risk?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a question that, I mentioned a little bit earlier that I'm on the 8573-7 committee, and I'm rewriting part 7 right now. And the majority of the topics that I'm bringing up in this new part 7 is understanding the risks of microbiology in compressed air. So are fungal organisms, and I think you mentioned mold, a risk? Absolutely, they are. There's toxins called aflatoxins that are generated from fungal organisms that are very, very dangerous. Also, it's important to note that fungal organisms are not like bacteria. So bacteria are single cell organisms that are very, they are less evolved than a eukaryotic organism, which is a multicellular organism, much like a fungal mold species. With that, it means using cleaning products is a lot harder. Mitigating risks is a lot different. And so you have to be mindful that bacteria and mold are not the same thing. They're not even close. So yes, there is microbiological risk. And why is that? So the number one thing I am constantly combating is you've got to be kidding me. You think a microorganism can live under pressure? Absolutely, I do. They're called barophiles, barophile, and they are pressure-loving organisms. That's a type of organism. The other type of organism is thriving on the fact that you might have a leak in your distribution piping. And so all it takes for an organism to really thrive is moisture and some nutrients. It just so happens that oil aerosols and oil vapors can act as nutrients for microbiological organisms. That is why you need to be sampling for moisture content in your compressed air. If you have high moisture, then it's an indication that you have a higher risk for microbiological growth. If you have oil vapor and oil aerosols at an elevated level, then it is a potential to have the risk of having microbiological contamination. So all of those things are definitely worth monitoring, because all it takes is one leak. A lot of people don't understand also that if you don't bleed your lines, let's say you have a hose that you're using and you just keep the air trapped in there. If you do spring a leak for whatever reason, it's possible that moisture can get in there and create a biofilm inside your piping system. And that's just bad. So what is a biofilm? A biofilm is like plaque on your teeth or like the slime in a sink drain. That's a biofilm. So it's sticky.
Nice.
So nice, Simon. So nice.
Okay, question from Gobinder. If compressed air is produced from oil-free compressor with a filter, what could be possibly the chemical and microbiological contaminants?
Yeah, so I see this a lot. There are two things that can happen. We'll talk about the ideal situation right now. You have an oil-free system. It was created as an oil-free system. Your distribution piping was installed after your oil-free system was installed. And so in that case, you may not have any oil or elevated oil in your system. But what is interesting is that the distribution piping, and this is something that I keep talking about because it's not necessarily the compressor at the outlet. It's also your compressor is also the entire distribution piping system. So when I talk about compressed air, I'm also talking about that piping system. And so I talked a little bit about leaks. So that's one important thing. And then there's also the outlet. So if the outlet isn't cleaned, then when you're pushing the air out, you're pushing out, and then the act of letting go bounces back, and there's negative pressure there. So that could be a way. But potentially, if you have an oil-free system, then the number one cause for microbiological contamination is going to be moisture.
Okay, question from George. What could be wrong? We process banana chips, which are free from microbes, but when we mill in a hammer mill, we get contaminated flour product with very high levels of TPC above 1000 CFU, even after rigorous cleaning regimes. There's no mention of compressed air in there, but
yeah, what could be wrong? I'm telling you, man, these microorganisms are asking to figure it out. Every time you throw a new cleaning procedure at a high risk area, or every time you use a new cleaning product, that microorganism, which replicates every 20 minutes, plus or minus, is learning how to combat that new cleaning product, how to combat that new protocol. And so it doesn't necessarily surprise me. Typically, I would say the reason people miss the source of microorganisms is because people don't believe it could be where it is. So I would look at a place that is probably what you least expect, a dry place, and oftentimes you'll find a leak or some moisture there. But yeah, without understanding really the minutia of your setup, I can't quite answer that.
I didn't realize was that clever, microbes, for tiny little things.
Yeah. We're in a pandemic, Simon.
Oh yeah. And we just got the mutated version, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, Ravi Kumar, our compressed air system is closed, another closed system, and does not have direct contact with product. There can be possibility of contamination due to leakage, right?
Absolutely. And again, that is when one thing I want to talk about is this continuous monitoring of water. So if you start seeing a uptick of moisture in your compressed air, it should signal to your quality department that you guys need to start sampling for microorganisms. And why is that? Because it only takes a little moisture to make for a happy microbe. And that is bacteria, yeast, and mold. So yes, absolutely. Even in a closed system, you can have leaks, and you can have leaks for any number of reasons. It's usually at conjoining parts of your piping, anything like that, a U shape, a U bend, an elbow bend of your distribution piping, hot, cold variations, like here in Texas, where it's usually really warm, tropical type weather, when we had this gigantic snowstorm, and don't laugh at us because we don't do snow well in Texas. We had a lot of distribution piping calls because we had cracks, and it's because the temperature went from hot to cold so fast. And they were older systems.
Okay, question from Suzanne. Can somebody, if anybody's here from Trace, can you put in the chat bar the link to your website and the risk assessment document or that area? Just feel free to pop that in the sidebar. A couple of questions, he's repeated this a few times, Lalit Kumar. Food fraud in compressed air. Because it's one of the utilities, air, you know, is that possible, food fraud?
I mean, here's the thing about compressed air. It's very dynamic. So a lot of the compressed air, so there's two different types. There's the compressed air that's getting sucked in from ambient air, processed, going through a dryer, or going through its filtration and then going to your distribution piping. The other kind is a compressor that's taking ambient air from the inside, and it's clean air. Then it's going through a dryer or a filtration process into your distribution piping. When you have any evidence of fraud when it comes to sampling compressed air, it's typically because somebody has missed their annual monitoring. And that's when, we start talking about seasonal changes. So if I talk so much about moisture and compressed air, then you should know the moisture level in ambient air changes seasonally. But if you're only testing once a year in the driest, hottest time of the year, then I don't think that's fraud, because, you're only being asked to, sample, I think, once a year. But I think it's better science and it's better quality of your facility if you're looking at quarterly testing.
Okay, great. Is there an easy method to test compressed air yourself in your food facility? That's from Christy.
Yeah, so here at Trace, we provide you with kits. It's a super easy kit, only 3 pieces. You put it together, and then you can sample in real time the moisture. You can sample the oil. You can sample microorganisms, any gaseous contaminants, and particles. So all of that can be done by you in your facility. Now, if you're looking for particulate contamination, you can do real-time particulate contamination testing using a laser particle counter. If it's in a really dirty area and you're just looking for a baseline, you can send us a sample, and then we can do microscopic analysis on it. With moisture, we can send you detector tubes, and you can do real-time moisture checking on your point of use. And remember, you need to be checking based on your risk assessment, either one or all of your points of use. It doesn't matter that your distribution piping is coming from one compressor, because a lot of these distribution piping systems are miles long worth of piping, and anything can happen from the compressor to your point of use.
Thank you. Question from Mary Carl. We use compressed air during cleaning. However, we ATP swab before processing. Is this enough to validate the area's cleaning? If not, how can we economically validate and verify it is clean?
So that's one thing. I have an article out with Simon, actually, and it discusses the importance of sampling compressed air correctly. So one thing that I notice is, okay, well, I'm going to get my compressed air, I'm going to blow it on a tabletop, then I'm going to use this ATP swab, or I'm going to use a microbiological swab. I'm going to swab the area that I just blew on, and then I'm going to send that for testing. Well, the inherent problem with that is when you're blowing compressed air onto a surface, you're also blowing ambient air with the compressed air. So you're making a solution of compressed air and ambient air. The difference here at Trace, we have an accredited method that allows you to sample just the compressed air. And so what it is it's a closed system. It hooks up to your point of use, and you put the compressed air through it. And then you know for a shadow of a doubt that, in fact, yes, this is just compressed air. You're not cross-contaminating it with ambient air.
Very good. And I think this is the final question. This would be amazing. Miss Dung, do you think compressed air combined with hot air steam with Donaldson filter is good?
So I'm not necessarily familiar with the filter, but one thing you can do to validate that question, is it good, is to sample it. So you just give us a call. We'll send you a compressed air microbiological sampler. You can plug it in, and then we can determine scientifically if it's good. You don't need to take my opinion. You can just take the fact, let's get it plugged in, let's sample it, because you cannot monitor the quality of your compressed air or your quality of your compressed gas if you're not testing. So it's important to test.
Okay, and my OCD will not let me ignore this last question. Hector, I'll be using oil-free compressor. Do I have to worry if I'm using the compressed air to mix fermenting wine?
Sure. And why is that? Because fermenting wine is also using microorganisms. It's also a nutrient. And so if you're going to be using compressed air, then you definitely, and that is direct contact to the food product or the beverage product, you definitely need to claim that as high risk, and you need to be monitoring the purity and quality of it.
Okay, thank you. On that note, I think we're done. Brilliant. Thanks, Maria. I've put in the sidebar a link to this session's topic. Hop on over to the discussion forum, continue the discussion, ask further questions, get the contact details for Trace, get those risk assessment templates, specifications, everything. So thanks, Maria, for your time. Brilliant.
Thank you. Bye, Simon.
Bye. Right, I'm going to play the video ads once again. Hope they work. Okay, we'll see you in 5 minutes for Chelle, Hartzer and Pest Management.
The world of food has changed a lot in the last 100 years. But one thing that doesn't change? Ensuring the quality and safe handling of food. No matter what changes are yet to come, we're proud to always be on our client's side, shaping the future of food today and tomorrow. No matter what changes are yet to come, we're proud to always be on our client's side. AIB International, the future of food ever on today and tomorrow.
Chelle, can you just switch your mic off, please? Okay, next up, Chelle, are you there? Chelle Hartzer, good day.
Hi.
Have you been watching a bit?
Earlier today. I had to log off for a bit, but yeah.
Okay, right then, let's get your slides on, Chelle, because I need to introduce you. Here we go. Right, this is Chelle Hartzer from 360 Pest and Food Safety Consulting. Hello, Chelle. And we'll put your slide there. There you go. Okay. So that's Chelle's info. If you want to take it down, we will be circulating these after. We're going to get straight stuck into now the Q&A. So I'll just get rid of those. There we go. So just tell us where you're joining us from today, Chelle.
Yeah. I am based outside of Atlanta, Georgia in the US.
Very good. Very nice. So we're this is the fourth one today. So it's pest management in the food industry. Any questions that you want answering from our expert, just post them in the sidebar. So first one from BG Ravi Kumar. Pest management. If a pest is not presenting hazard, then why is pest control required?
Yeah, that's a great point. We need to think about pest control not as controlling a pest that's there, but as preventing pest issues. So you may not have a pest issue inside your facility right now, but chances are there's some kind of pressure, there's some kind of risk that pests could get in, could establish. So really, we want to look at pest management and pest control as a preventative aspect of keeping the pests out. And if they do get in, finding them fast. So that's great that you have nothing going on right now. But situations are always changing. So a good pest control program is really going to take that into account and be customized to what's going on in your area so that those pests can be prevented so you can remain pest-free.
Okay. Question from Justice. Which is more effective, having in-house pest control or outsourcing the service?
Ooh, good question. I think it depends on your site and your preferences. Pest control companies, most of them are very well trained in how to use products, what to look for when it comes to pest conditions, how to identify things. So if you have an in-house team that is very well trained and experienced in all of those things, that in-house team can do as good of a job, if not better sometimes, than the pest control company because you're there all the time. You know what's going on. However, if you don't have that training and that experience, you might want to hire that third-party company to deal with those issues because they just might have a little bit more experience and knowledge in that particular field, and they can take that off your hands. So kind of up to you, and kind of depends on your level of training and experience.
But I guess even if you outsource it, you should really work closely with them.
That's a great point. Yeah, even if you have an in-house team that's dedicated to pest control, really everybody at the site has a role to play. I mean, everybody should be looking out for pests and reporting it if they see it. So yeah, even if you're going to outsource to a third party, you still need to have some control of that program and be aware of what's going on so you can do your parts within that program. That's a great point.
Okay, question from Carrie. Is there a standard distance pest control trap should be placed around the external of a building?
Oh, Carrie, thank you. This is such a great question. We get this all the time. Right now, no, none of the standard audits, SQF, BRC, AIB, any of the GFSI audits do not specify that stations must be X number of meters apart or placed in these specific locations. It should be based on the pest pressures and the site. I mean, let's be honest, you can put devices all around your site, but if you only have doors on one side, what's the point in putting stuff on a solid wall where nothing can get through? So it's actually based on a very old standard about 20 years ago where they did specify that stations should be X number of meters apart. But nowadays we want to base it on science. We want to base it on risk. And so there is no defined spacing on any of your devices.
Okay, and Benzili, please share some insights on integrated pest management.
You should do it. No, integrated pest management, the term has been around for decades now. And really what it boils down to is just that you need to be using all the tools that you have. Decades ago, it was, we just shut down and fumigate every 4 times a year, or, we spray on a regular basis. Using products, using pesticides can cover up the problem, and it shouldn't be used as the only tool. You should be integrating sanitation to remove food sources. You should be integrating exclusion processes to keep pests on the outside. Inspection is actually a tool when it comes to pest management. So really, we want to look at all those tools so that we can get to the root of the problem. We can get to where that problem is actually starting and what's causing it, so that we can solve that at its source instead of letting it continue on and maybe just covering it up. So integrated pest management is really important to look at all of those aspects and really integrate them into the program and combine everything to make that program better.
Okay, thank you. A question from Helmut. What's your take regarding pest control via heating of buildings? How often would you recommend to do the heat treatment of the building to control pests?
Sure. Heat treatments are very effective. And for those of you who haven't experienced that, it's raising the ambient temperature to usually about somewhere between 40 and 50 degrees Celsius, about 120 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And at that temperature, it is lethal to insects within a couple hours. The trick with heat treatments, especially in large buildings, is making sure every corner, every crack and crevice gets up to that temperature so it gets to that lethal killing point. So they are very effective. It just takes time, and it takes a lot of effort, again, to make sure that every little corner, every little area gets to that. How often should we do this? What are your pest pressures? What are your thresholds on your pests? I would not do it on a regular basis per se, but I would do it when it's needed. When your pests get to that certain point that you've reached whatever threshold you set, that's a good time to knock those populations back down.
And I'm interested in this. What do you use to heat it?
So there's a couple different systems out there. You can use electric heat, which isn't used too much in large scale because it's just too big. We use it a lot in bed bug treatments for, houses and apartments and hotel rooms. So there's a lot of gas heating, and propane is often used. So it just depends on which system it is, but there's a couple different options to heat.
And which pest does it kill? It doesn't kill mice and rats and things like that.
Oh, yes, it does.
Does it?
Oh yeah, so you get it.
All
You get it
right.
up to that 50 degrees centigrade, and after a few hours, it's lethal.
Wow.
You just you can't be in there. So no, it's effective on just about all of our major pests.
Interesting. Okay. Question from Tariq. We are facing a pigeon pest problem inside a production facility. How can we control pigeons?
Once they get inside, it's really hard. So the first thing I'd recommend is find out where they're coming in and see if we can keep them on the outside where they belong, and even maybe push them further back than that. But once they get inside, you can use nets to capture them and take them back outside. There are lethal means that can be employed to dispose of those birds on the inside. And depending on where they're resting, depending on where they're roosting, like if there's beams or stuff like that, you can put spikes or other types of deterrents so they physically can't land there. They physically can't sit there. So that might be something great to reach out to me if you have some pictures, and maybe I can give you some targeted recommendations on specifically what you're looking at in your site.
Okay, question from Chizak. How can a pest rampant environment be maintained to avoid contamination of raw materials and finished products in a manufacturing process? Is there a standard timing for baiting and fumigation of the process?
Yeah, the first thing I'd recommend is to make sure that you're monitoring for those specific pests that you know are an issue there, so that you can see where they're starting. I mean, you can take a big, huge warehouse and maybe you only have a problem that's starting in this corner over here, or maybe it is widespread. So I would start that monitoring program so you can see where your pest problems are, and then you can target those areas with your treatments. So instead of just baiting every week or every month, or putting down a spray on a regular basis, you can target certain areas and be much more effective in how you're treating for those pests if you know where they are. So it looks like we may have a few different pests that you're dealing with. So different treatments may be required depending on what level those pests are. But definitely fumigations require a full shutdown. So in the United States, those are typically done over a holiday weekend. So everybody's out, everybody's gone, the facility is shut down, but fumigations can also be pretty expensive. So we want to actually try and avoid those if we can by keeping those populations low. So institute a monitoring program first, find out what's going on, then respond to what that data is telling you.
Okay. You discussed a little bit about integrated pest management. So what would a robust pest management control system, the effectiveness?
Yeah, monitoring is really important. I've mentioned that a couple times. But if we don't know what pests we're dealing with, if we don't know where they are or when they show up, we don't know how to treat effectively. We don't know what to do. So a robust pest control system is definitely going to incorporate monitoring devices so we can tell what those pests are, where they are, when they are. But I'll also add to that it also takes somebody looking at the data of what's collected. I mean, you can just say, yeah, we caught 3 mice, but what does that really mean? Somebody has to look at that and say, where did we catch those 3 mice? What's going on in that area that allowed those 3 mice to get in? And how do we fix that problem? So that robust program means somebody really keeping an eye on it and diving into that data and that information to help solve those problems. Okay.
Lalit Kumar, how do we detect eggs from a pest in feed?
Honestly, you really don't. Eggs, for insect eggs, I'm assuming, and not bird eggs. Insect eggs are tiny. They're microscopic. You are not going to see them unless you've got something under a microscope or under some type of magnification. The only thing you can do is potentially use sifters to sift them out of your product. But it's got to be a very, very fine mesh. But you're going to have to depend on seeing the adults or potentially the immature stages. The egg stage is just going to be impossible to find.
Yeah. Question from Ian. Why not make all food standards like BRC, SALSA, ISO, FSSC, etc., ensure that pest controllers are competent in rodenticide use?
Well, they should be. If they're a licensed pest control company, and in the United States and in many other countries, they have to be licensed. That means that they have to go through continuing education, and they should be more than competent in rodenticide use in the local laws. We know that the use of rodenticides differ between the US and between Europe and between other areas. So if you feel that your pest control company is not competent, I would highly suggest switching. It's just not a good company to be with then.
Okay. Anika, our IPM company operator left some used glue boards in our trash can, and AIB auditor noticed it and said it's against pest management.
Yeah, the pest, again, maybe you're doing it in-house, maybe it's an outside company. All of your devices, all of your monitoring devices, any dead pests that are found inside, that should be removed from the facility. So I know it may sound silly to collect all your glue boards and take them to the dumpster that's outside or the trash bin that's outside, but that is a standard that you should be removing that from the facility. So throwing it away inside the facility, you're right, is not allowed.
Okay, question from Tasby. Which is the most preferred physical pest control method in production line?
Oh, in a production line. That's an interesting one. It would depend on your pest. But when we talk about physical controls, it's usually exclusion. It's usually some kind of physical mean of keeping the pest farther away. So depending on your pest, whether that's an insect or depending on whether that's a rodent, that may be keeping them out of that room, not just that line, but that entire room, or potentially glue boards.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Ravi Kumar. I heard of microwave affects birds population and some have gone extinct. Can we use microwave methodology in pest control?
So there's a number of bird deterrent systems out there. I don't know that I've heard of the microwave one yet, but I'm going to look into that. But they have been using ultrasonic, and there are some sonic repellers that may use a certain sound wave, a certain pitch, or even certain calls, like using a hawk call to scare away certain birds. It's for those ultrasonic and sonic ones, they will work short term, but birds do get used to it. So if there's a good food source, they may come back and start ignoring that sound. But I'll have to look into the microwave for you. I haven't heard of that one.
In your many years of pest control, pest management, what's the biggest issue that you tend to see?
Oh, it varies, but if I had to pick one, I would say rodents, and specifically rats. I mean, we've got tons of insects out there. Insects get in, but man, when a rat gets in, that's a big deal, especially for a food facility. And rats get smart. They start to learn what a trap is. They'll avoid it. They'll start to learn the right pathways and the runways to take to avoid people and avoid traps. So if I had to pick one pest, I would say rats. And
so how do you prevent them?
So again, we want to keep them on the outside. So we want to seal up all those doors, keep everything closed as much as possibly we can. Potentially, if you're allowed to, use some of those bait stations on the outside and strategically put some traps, especially if you know that there's a risk or that there has been some issues in the past. Putting traps in strategic places so that you can catch them as soon as they get in so that they don't get in there and they don't establish.
Okay. Thanks. And a question from Pfizer. How to control pest problem if fencing was removed due to renovation and first fencing also needs to be removed also?
Yes, I'm assuming that this is like some kind of solid fence material that kept him mostly away. This is the trick with pest control. Sometimes, we want to use all the tools that we have, but sometimes we don't have all the tools. So I would take what you have left. I would take those bait stations. I would take those traps and increase them wherever you have them. If you've lost that one line of defense with your fence, increase your other lines of defense with additional materials. And again, ensure that any openings that can be sealed off, seal those off so that we keep those rats on the outside. We keep the rodents on the outside.
Okay, Lupita, is it necessary to rotate pesticides that are applied in the facility?
Lupita, thank you. Yes, absolutely. Especially with insects. Insects develop relatively quickly. I mean, we have stored product pests that, within 30 days have a second generation. So they can get resistant to pesticides. So we always want to rotate the active ingredients as much as possible. We don't want to continue to use the same thing over and over and over again.
Okay, Mary-Carl, we've had moth issues with pheromone traps and disruptors in the processing facility. Is this okay to have in food processing areas?
Well, if you have pheromone traps, those are your monitors. You want those to show moths if they are moth there. And that shows you where in the facility they are. Where is that trap? If you have mating disruption installed, that's awesome, because as soon as those moths reach that adult stage, it knocks them down. It doesn't allow them to mate and continue that next generation. So you will still see some moths in the pheromone traps, but they haven't mated because that mating disruption has interrupted them. And you know that you still have a problem somewhere. But as soon as they get to that adult stage, that mating disruption is going to knock them down. So yes, it's okay that they're there. That's a good indication that you can start inspecting those areas to find out what's going on.
Okay, Natalia just mentions that in AIB it does mention the distance between rodent traps in AIB.
It does only if you do not have previous data. So if you have data from last year, the year before, if you are a brand new facility, then yes, there are recommended distances. However, it's not required, especially if you have data.
Okay. Samyadip, would you suggest any specific method for pest management for a 24/7 busy kitchen?
Yes, definitely monitors, and educating the staff there, since they're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they're going to see what's going on. So if you educate them on what type of pests to look for and who to tell when they see something, that way those problems can be addressed very, very quickly. So monitoring devices and your employees' eyes are a great tool to keep you up to date on what's going on there.
Okay, Lalit Kumar, we know that rats and mice and all things not nice don't like the heat. What about the cold? If food is kept at 0 degrees cold temperature, then pest becomes zero in products?
Exactly. A lot of insects do have a little bit more cold tolerance, so they can survive slightly cooler temperatures. But at 0 degrees centigrade, everything is going to die within, I'll say for most of our urban pests, within 24 hours. Rodents will likely die within about that time. I'd have to check the specific hours, but at 0 degrees centigrade, yes, it will die.
Okay. What do you think about planting fruit trees in a factory premises? Not a good idea.
If you like birds and if you like rodents, go for it. However, that's going to attract birds. It's going to attract rodents. It's going to attract insects, especially flies. As that fruit falls and that fruit starts to decompose, then you've got flies, you've got cockroaches. So no, I really wouldn't recommend fruit trees by a food plant.
This summer over here, I don't know why, but whenever I had fruit in the house, these little tiny flies, and they just fly around your face all the time. Anyway, Ravi Kumar, in some food factory, heating, building and spraying of pesticide is not advised. What are the methods recommended for spiders?
So think about why spiders are there. Everything needs food, water, and shelter. So spiders are there because there's insects for them to eat. So I would look at what insects are there, what the food source is. And spiders are actually relatively easy to physically remove. You get we call them Websters in the United States. It's this kind of like hard plastic poofy at the end of a pole, and it kind of wraps up the spider web and wraps up the spider, and you can take that outside. But I would look at how the spiders are getting in and what the food source is, so that after you physically remove them, we get that source down so they don't come back.
Okay, Natalia, what new instruments can you recommend for bird control to prevent birds entering inside the facility?
You know, I don't know that there's anything super new and exciting. Really, any type of physical netting or shield or anything to physically stop them from entering is really the best policy. Even if that's a net that they can't get through. There's lasers which, you know, have minor effectiveness. Again, there's ultrasonic, there's sonic devices to scare them away, which have, you know, limited efficacy. So anything you can do that's a little bit more permanent, a little bit more solid to close up that opening is going to help you out.
Okay. In a night vehicle with food transportation and attracting insects with the light of the vehicle in the night, how to control?
Yeah, no, so just like the spider question, you know, we have the lights that's attracting the insects that may be attracting some spiders that want to eat those insects. So anything that you can do to try and reduce that light output or point that light away. So if those are trucks coming into your facility, if they can back in so that the lights are pointed away from the facility instead of pointed at the facility, and look at what lights you may have around your facility. And if any of that can be kind of shifted away from doors so that there's still light, but it's not shining on the doors that are attracting the insects inside.
Good point. What are the most significant signs of pest infestation? That's from Abu Harib.
Yeah, so seeing the pest, that's usually my first sign of seeing something. So we may see pest. If it's rodents, we may see droppings. We may see the feces that they leave behind. Chew marks, again, especially for rodents, but some of the insects will leave very distinctive chew holes through packaging or through raw ingredients. And sometimes spilled products. If they've chewed through some packaging, you'll see the spilled product underneath. You could start to look up and see what's above that. But this is where those monitoring devices, especially pheromone devices for stored product insects, come in very handy, because insects are small and they like to hide. So if we have some way of getting that advanced warning, with which those pheromone traps give us that advanced warning. So look for that as well.
Okay, Ramiz, how can we control infestation which regenerated from the nuts from insect eggs?
Okay, not sure that I completely understand that question, but I will say that nuts are prone to Indian meal moth and a lot of other stored product pests. So I would check with your supplier. If you have nuts coming in that are infested, I would send them back to the supplier. I would reject that load because we can't use that. So I would work with your supplier on that one.
Okay, Ian just mentions that glue boards are not allowed in the UK because they are inhumane.
Yes, yeah, you need to check with your local standards on that. Absolutely.
Joltry, how can we control fruit flies on a buffet set up with fruit salads?
So when that buffet gets broken down, when all the food gets removed at the end of the night or the end of the shift, make sure it's very well cleaned, no food left over. And one of the tricks when there is food in there, fruit flies do not fly very well. So setting up small fans to blow air over that food can often push them away from the food, that it's not as much of a problem.
Okay, Christy, rats seem like a very large pest that wouldn't fit in most internal pest traps.
So you need to be using the right traps. You know, the small tin metal boxes, not good for rats. However, if you get a rat size, one of the bigger snap traps, that is going to catch a rat. So yes, you're absolutely right. If you look at some of the smaller devices, they are intended for mice. So you need to use a device that's big enough for rats.
Okay, question from Margaret. There are some affectation to the environment with the pest programs.
I'm not quite sure what this is asking for, but I will say that, our weather conditions, environmental conditions drive pest issues. We know that there's more pest issues in the warmer months, in the wetter months. If we have severe weather conditions, that affects our pest populations. So hopefully that answered that for you, Margaret.
Okay, and a question from Mario. Is fumigation of a container 99% solution, or is it more minimization?
If the fumigation is done correctly with the right concentration of gas at the right time, it is 100% effective.
Okay. Are exterior spider sprays useful at all?
I would look at the insect population that they're feeding on, but it will knock down some of the spiders.
Okay, I think this is the last question from Christina. What type of pest control to prevent cockroaches in a high humidity region?
Trying to reduce, drive off some of that humidity, depending on the outside landscape, and planting the right plants sometimes to soak up some of that moisture.
Okay, I think we're going to have to, do you want to just answer one more? Weevils infestation in a flower silo.
Yeah, one, fumigation is very effective. Two, I would get that flour out of there, sift it so that you remove those weevils, and then store it properly so it's not reinfested. Okay, brilliant, Chelle. Fantastic, as usual. Really appreciate it. And you love pests that much, you've got them on the wall at home. What are they? Are they cockroaches? So a cockroach and a cricket.
There you go. Your favorite two friends. Thanks very much, Chelle. Just to say before you go, there is a discussion topic for this session on the IFSQM forum. I've put the link in the sidebar. So if your question's not been answered, just hop over there, pop your question in, and Chelle might be able to help you. You never know. Okay, speak soon, Chelle. Okay. Right. Next up will be Robin, Levin, and Sarah from SAI Global, and they'll be discussing driving trust and confidence in food provenance. But first, I'm going to play the adverts again for 3 minutes. So if you want a quick break, nip away, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Webcams and mics off for the time being.
The world of food has changed a lot in the last 100 years. But one thing that doesn't change? ensuring the quality and safe handling of food. No matter what changes are yet to come, we're proud to always be on our clients' side, shaping the future of food today and tomorrow. AIB International, ever onward.
Okay, Robin, Sarah, the last advert there on the video ads was sponsor SAI Global, and we've got Robin, Levin and Sarah Cunningham from SAI Global. If you can switch your webcams on. We'll just put your slides on so we can go through that. Just bear with me. Okay, so this next topic is driving trust and confidence in food provenance, as mentioned with Robin, Levin and Sarah Cunningham. Okay, welcome guys. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks for having us.
Have you been watching any of it?
We have. We've definitely been interested in the last one. Rodents and bugs are right up our street on farms. So. True.
Well, it's rapid fire, so we won't waste any more time because we've only got 30 minutes. So I'll let you take your intro from here before we get to the Q&A.
Great. So I'm Sarah Cunningham. I'm the Agriculture Manager at SAI Global. And I'm just look after all of our certification and technical auditing activities within the agriculture area in the UK and Ireland. Robin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Robin Levin, and a very festive warm welcome from SAI Global. You can see from our intro slide here that we're involved in farm assurance and food assurance across the chain. I'm sure many of you know that already. We work out going from pre-conception on farms. We're involved in the artificial insemination of pigs with an assurance scheme, right the way through to post-consumption, where as part of our SCM strategy, we help various people deal with complaints from the end result of that. And on the way, we're involved in the farm assurance standards. That's particularly what Sarah and myself cover, food manufacturing, logistics, retail and hospitality, the whole food chain we're involved with. So we work particularly with some specialist standard owners, as it says there, people like Red Tractor, Leafmark, Global Gap, many retailers and so on. So, and obviously on the food side, that includes BRCGS, GFSI, IFS, and as you can see.
Okay.
So yeah, just talking on to some of the services that my team provide within the agriculture area. So within the livestock area, we do some Marks and Spencer's auditing. We are working in Global Gap, IFA, Red Tractor, quite a big relationship we have with them, auditing standards for them for beef and lamb, dairy, poultry. Then we've also got our own scheme for quality assured farmed venison. We work in Leafmark, and then we also have some sort of slightly different supply chain type audits relating to livestock. So we have livestock auction markets and livestock collection centres. And there are some other retail specifics that we do. We also work in the arable sector as well. So we again work with Red Tractor quite heavily on combinable crops, and we also do fresh produce and Safe Haven, and then also our Global Gap benchmark. Along with other Global Gap schemes, and yeah, going down all the way through to again some retailer specifics. And some of the more bespoke schemes that we work on. We work on livestock transport, so that's the haulage that gets that animal from the farm or market to the abattoir, or vice versa sometimes. We've got the British Game Alliance. That's one of our new standards we've taken on. So that's just around an assurance scheme for game birds and the shooting that goes on quite a lot over here in the UK. We've got the BDFPA, which sits really well with us for our venison. So that's the British Deer Farm Parks Association audit, and Scottish Quality Wild Venison. We have some purchaser schemes. We also work in IPPC. So that's looking at integrated pollution prevention control. And that mainly focuses around our poultry work. And yeah, we also work with other standard owners like the Soil Association to deliver some of our audits.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. We do other sorts of audits where we're not just involved in food, but this is what this is all about. But we're involved in all the ISO standards and many other things. So really, we tend to work, particularly in agriculture, but probably in most other things too, on the 5 pillars of assurance, and this is as the customer and probably most of the retailers see it. First and foremost, people they want to know where the food's come from, so traceability. Obviously, the food is safe. Animal welfare is actually number 2. Traceability is number 1. Welfare seems to be number 2. That if it does contain meat, that it's an animal that's been well cared for. Number 3 is safe food. You'd think that might be number 1, but it's perhaps many people see it as a given. Care for the environment is number 4, and the growing one from a farm point of view is the ethical social audits. And one of the things we do now, there's more information in the standards that we do work to, but also specifically we will use GRASP, Global Gap GRASP, where available in the UK as well. So that's a brief introduction to SAI, and obviously we've got the website there as well. So we're looking forward to some of your questions.
Okay, feel free to add a question in the sidebar. Anybody that's involved in this sector, or even not, perhaps a customer of this sector, or even a supplier. Well, there's a question from Anika. Food safety, food defence. Do they come into standards such as Global Gap? You know, there's been a big rise in food defence, food fraud. Is that an area that's considered within the standards that you've mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think agriculture is probably quite different to some of the food-based audits, but it still has that intrinsic food safety and so on. And with the fresh produce audits that we do mainly for Global Gap or Red Tractor, and indeed some of the retailer-based audits that we do too, food safety and food defence does come into it really through the HACCP and TACCPs that we would be involved in, probably in a more junior scale than you would have in GFSI, because it's really dealing with a very practical farming environment. But it's, you know, the difference really is probably between HACCP and TACCP. We're looking more perhaps at at the malicious contamination elements now than we were, and actually on farm, I guess from a food safety point of view, probably it's a similar thing. It's looking at risk assessment. Part of it now is looking at risk assessment for the environment as well, of course. So the environment is a big part of that too. In terms of the actual food safety on farm, it's getting it to the farm gate. From there, it then moves on further through the scale. So I don't want to kind of go into that, because this is more about agri from our point of view, and sort of bringing that element of food assurance into this conversation. Yeah. So we've got some other interesting questions coming through.
Okay. So from Alok, sometimes food security also chips into confusers. Some clarifications here expected.
Yeah, that's true, and I guess we're talking primarily about food safety. Food security from a farm point of view is very different, I think, to a sort of perhaps a retail or a manufacturing situation. But food security on a farm might be more about this, making sure the food that leaves is secure from malicious contamination as much as it can be, because if you're growing a huge field or thousands of hectares of crops, or there may be livestock outside in a very open environment, clearly the security is not the same as if it was in a more finished, more potentially dangerous state through manufacturing and processing. But farmers take that food security very or as much as they can, because it is their livelihood. Mm-hmm. It's quite difficult, I think, here to explain it without standing in a field with you, because that doesn't, in the same way that it would in a BRC type audit, it's not quite that issue. It's more about what it is in real life on a farm rather than once it leaves.
But what I mean, I don't know, for example, Global Gap or Red Tractor. What does a system look like? Covering what would be the requirements expected of a farmer, for example, who grows things.
It sort of goes back to the 5 pillars, doesn't it, Robin, that we showed already, that sort of really centres around, having that traceability, the food safety, the animal welfare. These are already key important things that pull together all of the standards and underpin that. And I think that could be whether or not you're looking at Global Gap or Red Tractor or any of the other schemes that we work within. They often are the key foundation for what the standards are trying to achieve and what the public find reassure them as well about the provenance of their food. So I think that's probably, going back to that slide, really answers that one.
And is it for example, British retailers, is it a mandatory requirement that their supply is certified to such standards?
Yes, I think the whole chain assurance works very well, particularly in the UK, where of course most of these standards first started. That, as we say, from before production starts on a farm, assurance kicks in and works right the way through till people eating the food, and the linking from when it leaves the farm it is very good, and to have the end product with a trademark, if you like, a branding, and Red Tractor would be a very good example. It's got to go right the way through the chain, and that helps the public in particular with growing affection and trust of that brand, along with obviously the retailer concerned.
Yeah. I mean, even just the lay person like myself, I know what Red Tractor is not the standard. I see it on food packages.
And just to expand on that a bit, in answer to some of the questions, is that the standard owners, and again, Red Tractor, it could be Leaf, could be Global Gap, they give a lot of detail to the farmer about what is required for each particular section in the standard. And they also give us a lot of detail about what they're expecting us to be looking out for. And it is spelt out. It's very clear. It is a process that is very clear. And it's worth looking, if you want to know more about it, it's worth looking on the website of Red Tractor. They're freely available, the standards, and Leaf. And you can see directly what that looks like.
Does Global Gap, for example, come under the GFSI umbrella or not?
Global Gap is benchmarked to GFSI.
Oh, it is, yeah.
And there are some parts of Global Gap that are not, but the overall farm standard is benchmarked to GFSI, and they've always seen that as a very important but particularly operating on an international basis. They can deliver that anywhere in the world.
Okay, a question on traceability, actually, from Justice. In a farm setup, which is more challenging, forward or backward traceability?
The way the standards are set out, Justice, that you go through the whole audit, and we would do backward and we would do up to the point it leaves the farm gate. So we're not required to then move on beyond the farm gate particularly. But from the farm gate, let's say we were perhaps in a slaughterhouse, then forward and backward traceability is part of pretty much all the standards for that processing side. But on the farm side, we can trace backwards very easily, and we can also, at the point that it leaves, there'll be a passport per product that shows where it's come from. And we do look through records as to show where it's gone to. And particularly on the combinable crop side, we are keeping a record that the farmer's got records of where the next point in the chain is it goes to.
And then we're looking at just picking up another scheme, I think, is how we do it. So if we look at the beef and lamb sector, for example, we've got to the farm gate. The livestock haulier has now picked up the stock that they're audited. So there's that other part there where their records are checked, and then it goes on to its final destination. If it goes to a livestock market, they're then audited, and we check what controls they have there in place to maintain the standards throughout their time there. So you just keep picking up, sometimes depending on the scheme, the different standards to get it all the way to the end user or the end purchaser.
Yeah, with the requirements that make sense to what they're doing. Yeah. So what? I suppose it's different, but in the different sectors, what sort of common non-conformities, where maybe in broad terms do we need to improve more in the different links in the chain?
I'd probably say, Robin, we've got to talk about changes first. I think that's generally when there's a change, that's where we will find an increase potentially in non-conformances. It's just while it takes its time to factor through for the knowledge, is why that stands there to factor through the industry. Sometimes that is the reason why we may get some non-conformances. It's not just a disregard. It is just changing what you do. And sometimes change is difficult when it's worked for years and years and you've been successful in farming whatever you farm or growing what you grow. You then pop a change in and it just takes a bit of acclimatization. So you can then move on from there to kind of start adhering to it.
Yeah, not all the farmers started farming so that they could fill out paperwork system to prove their assurance.
I can imagine.
And sometimes they can get quite frustrated, particularly if there's a one-man band trying to do everything. But nevertheless,
they see it as red tape.
Well, they do, some of them, but some of them see it as a good challenge. They want to be on top of the game. They do not like being sort of having a non-conformance and being criticised. And farmers themselves are part of the origin of farm and food assurance, in reaction to BSE, amongst other things, and various food safety incidents. So some of them are proactive. Some of them kind of find it hard to be as proactive as we'd like and probably they'd like. But, the system works.
It's continual improvement and changing culture and things like that. Okay, we've got a question from Alan. Let's mark it. There is more discussions and discourse around food systems with particular emphasis around cultural norms, efficient production, minimizing food wastage, inclusivity, etc. How is the global gap evolving to take into effect these pertinent issues?
A good question, actually. It's Global Gap and Red Tractor are very, very similar. They're all, cultural norms. There are differences from country to country. The great thing about Global Gap is it is a thing that can fit across a whole range of different countries quite comfortably, and particularly with the very small farm production setups. Because they're able to operate under what's called option 2, where they're allowed to group together and adopt a quality management system. So those sort of cultural norms that may be there, efficiency of production and auditing, and minimising food wastage is part of all the standards, and will increase. Many of the questions, and we could talk about some of the environmental systems in particular, like leaf mark standard like that. That is particularly looking at increased efficiency and minimising food wastage, because that's part of all wastage. And also there's quite a lot of, apart from the standards that we deliver, there's quite a lot of input from various governmental departments to try and minimise food wastage and improve efficiency. And one of the things that Farm Assurance does do, we have consistent support from this from our farmers, particularly the larger, more organised farms, is that does do that. We recently audited a vertical farm, and we've been filming them to actually help young farmers in the future.
Sorry, Robin,
vertical farm. Oh, sorry, thrown a curveball in there. Vertical farm is this new system of farming that's being looked at quite a lot, particularly on the fruit and vegetable side, where at the moment we might have a field or a building that's one level, and you could say, well, let's have a block of flats of fields and buildings. This being trying to make it easy to understand, as long as the sun can get in and the light, and there's enough space and room. So food farming now, there's a vertical farming growing, particularly on the vegetable and fruit side, and that in particular, with the filming that we've been recently doing, is all about minimising waste, minimising water usage, improvement in efficiency of electricity and gas, and so on, and also providing stability and robustness in the face of climate change. So, if you've got a really good sturdy building, it's going to withstand. Maybe not some of the stuff that's been going on in Kentucky recently, but actually I think it probably would. It's going to withstand that sort of climate violence, if you like, that something outstanding in the field may suffer tremendously. So, there really is some good stuff, and it's actually probably more the farming technology that fits into that. Efficient production, of course, as well, is involved in farmers being more efficient, making possibly more money. We go and do our audits of these, and there are standards that encourage efficiency and food wastage minimisation. So inclusivity, I'm not sure that's particularly around every country in the world particularly evident, but it is evident when we're doing audits, and it is part of some of the standards locally.
Okay, a specific question about honey. I don't know if you deal with it, bees and honey, about traceability. How's that done? Is it challenging?
That's a really interesting question, because honey and the question has raised it. Honey is a farmed, honeybees are farmed insects, but as yet, certainly in the UK, we haven't audited as a farm standard, but we probably should, because it is really interesting. I have an involvement peripherally through honey being used in Kenya to help farmers establish livelihood, and as a former beekeeper, through my family, it's very interesting. But we don't do it through Farm Assurance as yet, but it is obviously covered by some of the food assurances further up the chain. Yeah.
Okay. And then a question from Vladimir, who's a speaker tomorrow, actually. GFSI standards are asking for food safety culture, and we discussed earlier with Core Groenveld food safety culture requirements in ISO 22000. How could this be presented in a global gap for cases when there are seasonal workers? Are there any mention of food safety culture, senior management commitment, and these types of things? There's
a commitment in all of the fresh produce audits for a commitment to food hygiene, which I think is food safety culture, and it's a separate document within Global Gap that everybody has to produce. And of course, when you go through the audits now, some of the seasonal workers may be supplied by a labour provider. Some of them may be employed directly. But in all of that, they all have to be trained. They all have to demonstrate, or we have to see it demonstrated that all of the food safety standards are being adhered to, and there are signs in all the languages of the seasonal workers and so on. So we do see that on a farm situation firsthand.
Okay. And a question from Richard, who works in a slaughter facility in Canada. One of the challenges that I see is the producer is not recording the actual quantity of birds shipped to our facility. We have incorporated devices such as bird counters, but I wondered if this is a common problem at other facilities in traceability. So
that's a good question as well. I think increasingly, certainly in Global Gap, the idea of recording what product has come in and what product in total has gone out, and also incorporating, there may be some sites that are producing where some of the product may not be under an assured standard. Global Gap's a very good example of that, where they do this type of thing, and we do it as well in Red Tractor, particularly with grain. But on the meat side, it is incumbent on the producer to actually have a record of how many birds are going to the facility, and also the buyer, because if you're making payment, that's an easy figure to keep hold of, isn't it? So
yeah, it's also enshrined in some law over here as well. Basically, shouldn't be transporting any livestock without sort of the correct documentation. So we have something called an ATC, which is an animal transport certificate. So that would list exactly what's on that load. We have cattle passports and food chain information forms, the movement licenses for sheep and goats and so pigs. So these sorts of things mean that we've got quite a robust system in place of checking what's leaving a farm, so nothing basically breaches the law, really, because like I say, it is enshrined in quite a lot of law over here.
And it also has the effect of being able to measure food waste. You know, what comes out of a field or a house comes in, it's recorded. What leaves goes out, it's recorded. There's always going to be a slightly difference between the two. So it should be available to you, Richard, I would have said.
Okay. Let's have a look. Question from Esther. It's quite a long one. I would like to know your opinion on the use of all these standards nowadays. If I am not mistaken, they took off as a requirement to produce other labels products. How is that now turned to be a requirement? A food certification is required to a food company that wants to sell his products in another country or in the supermarkets with his own label. Does that make any sense to you? I'm struggling to pick a question out of that.
I guess
it's the purpose of the standards thing. Maybe we can pick up. I think that is to reassure the public about what they're eating. Again, going back to these 5 pillars, that it's safe, it's traceable, the animals all that have been looked after, the environment hasn't been damaged while you're doing it. Obviously, there are instances, in this country and outside of this country, where we do have to amend law and standards to adapt and react to make sure that we can put some prevention in to ensure that that requirement is now taken care of, so we don't have the same issues again. I think that bit I can kind of glean from that one.
The other thing is that if a product is produced to the standards that we audit, it doesn't always have to be, but what it does allow the producer is to have a much wider spectrum of choices as to how to sell their product. And so there's a big advantage to the farmer in particular, and any product that's gone through the system, that it's going to be open to more people wanting to buy it because it is assured. Yes, it does mean that it's available for export more easily because it's produced to a recognised standard. And it does mean that a supermarket can market somebody's products because it is assured and may well be carrying a logo to prove that.
Okay, question from Ian. Can we have more methods of testing raw materials for authenticating food products rather than relying upon paperwork, including SERA, PCR, ELISA testing, or more rapid mobile methods that could raise reasonable suspicion to support a lab test?
Quite a lot of product already comes under testing regime. And there are a number of labs that do that. The ones we use have to be accredited to cover the things that are being tested for. The standards all specify what products need to be tested, on what frequency, and what sort of areas they should be done. Some of it also comes down to the producer voluntarily submitting and looking at various issues. So it could be pesticide contamination, often is looked at in fresh produce. Could it be water quality that then goes on to the crop that could produce potential problems? All of those things are tested for. And internationally, there's quite a comprehensive testing system, particularly in bulk grain, where contaminants are looked at as well. So also on the industrial side, there are very strict industrial standards. Certainly in the UK, we have the Agricultural Industries Confederation, and all of those inputs into agriculture are very strictly tested and produced. Yes, there could be more, and it'd be lovely if we could have a rapid test that could give you a result within 30 minutes. Having just been abroad and been tested myself, it's been quite handy. But of course we can move it on. Of course, technology can help make these things better.
Okay. So anyway, final point. It's standards improving, confidence improving.
Yeah, definitely. We can say that nearly half of the public now actually rate, in the UK anyway, that their confidence, because of the standards and regulation we have, it is high. That's why they trust eating food over here. So I think things like that are really important take-home messages, that with these sort of logos being out there and people understanding what's behind them, you can actually really make an impact in reassuring people that the food they're eating is safe.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, we've run out of time. Thanks very much for your time, for your input. It's the first time you've joined us here. Hopefully next year you'll be back for some more webinars and things.
Thank you very much for having us, and maybe we can raise agriculture and other things even more widely.
I've learned a lot, definitely. We've not covered this topic before, so it's been great. I've put a link in the sidebar to a discussion topic on the discussion forum IFSQN. If anybody wants to ask a question, we can follow up there afterwards. Okay, so thank you both. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Thank you.
Happy Christmas.
Yeah, all the best. Bye. Right. I'm going to play the video ads again, our kind sponsors, and then we'll be back with Chris Domenico to discuss food safety management software. Okay. See you in 3 minutes.
The world of food has changed a lot in the last 100 years. But one thing that doesn't change? Ensuring the quality and safe handling of food. No matter what changes are yet to come, we're proud to always be on our clients' side, shaping the future of food today and tomorrow. AIB International, ever onward.
Okay, we should have Chris Domenico from Safefood 360. Oh. Yep. I'm not moving. Am I frozen? Can you hear me though?
I can hear you.
Great.
How are you doing?
Welcome, Chris. I'll just put your slides up and then we'll just run through those and we'll get going with the Q&A. Just hang on. Right, so yeah, food safety management system software, Chris Domenico, and I'll let you just take the slides from here, Chris, and just do your intro.
Okay, I think you might have the wrong slide up there, but I think that was from my last time that I met with you. But just a quick overview. Number one, I want to thank everybody for joining today's sessions. It's a really great time that we're having, and certainly a good learning experience. I just want to quickly go over my topic is food safety management software, and just a very quickly, just to kind of go through, and I'm just gonna kind of come through here a little bit, and that I think we'll just pass on this just to give you a quick idea. Safefood 360. And food safety management software. Essentially, what that is it's a software solution to assist companies, food manufacturing companies, with having aligned programs that are aligned with the schemes and regulations, what have you. And it really brings all of your programs together in one place, as opposed to having disparate systems and solutions and manuals on shelves and what have you. So it's a really allows you to become electronic, give you that technological kind of assistance with your programs. So with that, Simon, I'm not sure, do you have any questions? Are you there?
Hear me, Chris? Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, sorry about that.
Let's get rid of these slides and let's get straight on to the questions about food safety management system software. So, any questions for Chris? So we've got how long have we got? We've got until 5:25. So we've got 27 minutes. So. If you're using software, if you're using paper, let us know. If you want to know what software can do, what the benefits are, how you'd go about it, just ask in the sidebar. So just a question, Chris. Your background, you're a food safety manager.
Yeah.
Going back in time, and how did you used to do all your procedures in the old days and things?
Well, it's actually interesting. Is that I worked for some very, very large companies, and they were primarily paper-based programs. So effectively, you have your entire programs. Everything was put on paper. Everything was put on Excel spreadsheets. And I distinctly recall having an audit, like with I believe it may have been it was a regulator. And between myself and that regulator were about 19 different manuals And so every question he had, and it's like, where's this, where's that, and it was essentially just pushing that manual forward. And then along came GFSI over some time, and just the BRC, SQF, what have you. And I recall going through that whole process of gaining certification, and I did that with another company. I left the large company I was working for. I helped out another company to get them certified. And while I was there, that's really when Safefood 360 was born. And so we had launched that in the US. But essentially what that was is that took the place of all of those paper systems. Today I kind of, as I do demos for companies, and I speak with managers around the world, I kind of make the joke that I'd love to have something like this. I'd almost like to be a QA manager again, but then I remember what that was like. So I quickly realized I'm in a better place.
Having been one myself, I know, and I do know. So let's get into some questions. I don't know what's happening with my webcam. I might have to do a hard refresh shortly, but okay. Christy, are there any affordable software options for small companies? My president is interested but not willing to spend the money on a program.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are certainly. I will actually just say this, and Simon, this is a plug for you. Is actually prior to, and going back many years ago, more than a decade, I recall logging into IFSQN on a daily basis. I'd grab my coffee, and then I'd spend quite a bit of time just in Safefood 3 or in IFSQN rather. So but there are solutions out there that are affordable, but it's kind of, I guess the old saying is you get what you pay for. And so some of those off the shelf solutions that you might be able to maybe that fits in your budget. Again, you just need to remember that it's an off-the-shelf solution, and you're going to simply, it's more or less a glorified Excel program, or what have you, or maybe it's just a document repository. Whereas your solutions like Safefood 360, these are working solutions that are going to allow you to manage your entire program. And in our case, we have a professional services team that actually works along with you to as your systems, as your programs are put inside Safefood 360, as your site's configured, there's actually a consultative review that happens with all of your different programs so that you can see a successful outcome, business outcome at the end of that project. So, and then as you manage, as you complete your programs, they'll be done in a organized manner and in a consistent manner across the entire business group.
Okay, thanks. You've got one. Can you hear me, Chris?
Oh, yeah. I guess if you don't mind, just real quickly on that, there is there are scaled down, like it is in our case, we actually do offer some scaled down solutions if you're just wanting to get your feet wet in software. There absolutely is alternatives that we can work with you. And it really comes down to what your needs are and where your budget is.
Yeah. So that question there from Maxine: could a company purchase one module, e.g., hazard analysis? Is that actually possible, or?
We have a HACCP solution, but the thing is with our software, it's essentially you have that license, and in that license it contains all of the modules, all of those programs that as a QA manager you're going to need and you're going to require. But again, like I said, there are scaled down solutions, but we don't sell for our software, we don't sell the modules out independent of one another. It would simply be a solution maybe that would be a fit, but in that solution it's going to give you all of the programs, all of those the modules that you're going to need to operate effectively your HACCP program or a sanitation program, so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Jim, you mentioned systems can be aligned with schemes. Are you aware of a software system for managing different GFSI schemes? I'm just going to refresh.
Yeah, I guess to answer that question, actually our software itself, we have hundreds of schemes available in the software, but the way that it was built against a forensic analysis of the GFSI programs and of regulations of industry technical standards and best practices. So, you know, using the software, and as you do your vetting, as you properly look at the softwares that you like, the alternatives even, and you go out, actually encourage everyone, go out and do a proper vetting of the software, find out the fit for you, the solution that's going to work for you. And you know, you'll find Safefood 360 really was built in such a way that as you're using it, it's going to point your feet forwards towards compliance, regardless of the scheme that you want to comply with or that you need to.
Yeah, because I've refreshed, I can't see any questions. It's completely blank. So I've refreshed everything. So you're going to have to read the question out yourself.
Says there's one here, says it will be more useful and easier. Will it be more easier to audit on a system rather than using paper? And I think on that, what I would say there is I distinctly recall many years ago, as a QA manager myself, going out and auditing the floor, auditing the facility, and literally walking out on the floor with a blank piece of paper and a pen and going, that don't look right, that doesn't look right, nope, that's non-conforming. And then I'd get back to the office and I'd send out that corrective action, and whether that was answered or not, that was really, you know, neither here nor there. But essentially, then if you kind of look at software and how that actually can assist you, you can create that prescriptive audit, and you can conduct your audits against that bullet point of requirements. And you know, like in our software, you know, you're able to even upload photographs. You know, I recall years ago putting it on a little digital camera and then getting back to my office and having to upload those pictures. And it was an incredibly, I used to not like having to do audits because there's just so much work involved in it. So this just makes it a much easier process. You can create those corrective actions right out of those audits and carry them out. And your entire team can then be working towards that one goal of doing things in a compliant way. You say, this is what we need to do, and this is how we need to do it. And the software is really just going to allow you to do what you say.
Yeah. I guess once it's set up okay for you as a company, and everyone's trained, the efficiency of such a system, you know, even things like, I remember having to remember dates when things were due and things needed refreshing or reviewing, and it was a minefield, but it's all automatic now, I guess. It
is. And I mean, you, as you build out the structure of whether it's an audit or it's any one of the other programs that you have, you schedule that out, and the software really administers the program for you. So you're not sitting there, you know, lording over some schedule, some spreadsheet, or you've got some note pinned up on your corkboard to remind you that you need to go out and do this, and then that falls off and you just don't get it done. The software, it's going to ensure that these are done on that proper schedule, and then there's even alerts in the system when that's missed or when that's not completed, or if there's CCP breaches or whatever it might be. The software is alerting you to those issues then. Yeah. So you're able to ensure things are, you're actually a well-oiled machine, your system.
And everybody who has an input into that system has their own dashboard.
Absolutely. There's there'd be a main dashboard that you'd have a feed of all of the data, an intelligent look down at everything that's in your system. But then every one of those individual modules has its own dashboard as well. But then your team members, your QA techs, the users, those end users, they have their own My Actions page. You know, they have their own list. It's essentially their schedule, their to-do list for that day, and they can work right out of there. Here's my programs, here's my actions, here's my activities, and they can complete them. And they actually then have summaries of their overdue actions, those actions that they have that are where there may have been issues. So,
and just one more thing, linking it. I'm just thinking about food safety culture that we talked about before. I guess the CEO.
I've lost you.
How's the whole?
Can you repeat that question? Because you froze up on me there. It might have just been my end.
No, I'm just saying that we talked about food safety culture at the top of this day. And I guess within such a system, as even a CEO can have a dashboard, food safety and quality, you know, what has been done, what's not been done, where are we doing well, where we're not, etc., etc. And that sort of oversees food safety culture in a way.
Well, yeah, it actually can go a step further than that, Simon, is you can have one solution at one local site. So if you're managing multiple facilities, you can have those single solutions at each one of those sites. But then on top of that, you know, you might have an enterprise layer or that corporate environment, that flight deck, where all the data from across your entire business group is fed up. And then, yes, those corporate managers, those directors, what have you, they have real-time oversight of everything that's not only just happening at one facility, but really everything across the entire business group, so they can see where their compliance is, they can see where their risk is at.
Okay. I can see Vladimir's question, but if you can see any below that, please answer those first.
Let me...
I've got...
Mike, I see one that says, you mentioned systems can be aligned with schemes. Are you aware of a software? Oh, I think that was one that we already answered that question there.
Yeah, we did.
If I have my own system, which is effective in meeting the requirements, maybe to 80 to 90%. I'm not sure if I understand that question, but essentially, I'm thinking that if you have your own system, are you able to use this almost like a hybrid solution? And absolutely, you can, and it works well with that. However, the more that you're going to use of that software program, obviously, the greater your ROI is going to be, and you're going to have that, you know, that return back to you in multiple times here. So, under the assumption that we will have some or even all important records of our company FSMS in the software, what are the reactions of regulative inspection when they come to a facility to check those records? It says, are there any rejection done by inspectors that are not sufficiently into technology? Okay, so essentially there, the question is, how are regulators responding to this electronic, you know, your solution and what have you? And I'll say, you know, years ago, I mean, I think when software technology started to kind of be a part and parcel of food safety management, regulators, they wanted to touch and feel paper. You know, so, you know, you were able to print out records, you were able to do, you know, some manual activities in there and print out your entire HACCP plan, for instance. However, as time moved on and more of the auditors have been exposed to these systems, and particularly Safefood 360, what they've seen is that actually is a tool that is of great assistance to the QA manager, and they are now happy to review your programs in an electronic environment, and they'll absolutely do that. So, you know, there's some clients that I know of who actually have invited their auditor right into their system so they can conduct that desk audit remotely. And then speaking of that, I know during the COVID lockdown, remote auditing became a hot topic. And, you know, as opposed to simply just having a Zoom call and holding up your records in front of the camera, really, really enabled the ability to have true remote audits and have something that was actually sustainable, for sure. So yeah. Go ahead. You can go on with the question you had mentioned.
Okay. Hector, what is the cost for Safefood 360? Would it help me getting in compliance for FSSC 22,000?
Yeah, I'll answer the second part of that question is that absolutely yes. FSSC 22,000, that is one of the schemes that are embedded in the software, and it's one of these schemes that we used when we initially did that massive gap audit to ensure everything was, you know, that the software is going to be built against those standards. So, you know, everything, your requirements, that is part of the system. The workflows are structured in such a way that you are going to be ticking off those boxes to ensure your compliance. But then regarding the cost, by all means, I would say, you know, get a demo, have a demo with us, and we can kind of give you that customized quote. But, you know, just so you're, I guess, to give you a ballpark figure, you know, I mean, it really comes down to the scope of your programs and how are you going to be utilizing it. Are you one facility or are you 100 facilities? And what type of a setup do you actually need? So, you know, I mean, like for one site, you might be looking at, you know, somewhere's in the neighborhood of, you know, it'd be a 5-figure number. Probably looking at, you know, more than 10, less than 25,000.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Mengetsu, can it be customized for our company? You know, like process changes, etc. Is it customizable? Basically, the software.
Essentially, it's a platform. And that platform is used by hundreds of companies, hundreds of other companies. They all have their own instance of that. So, you know, that the software itself, again, you have that platform to use, but there are certain portions of the software which actually are customizable. So, and in the case of a process change or a business change type of a program, we actually do have one module that speaks specifically to that, and it will answer all of those your needs for any type of a stage gate type process that you can customize. So you literally can go in and say, here at this stage, we need to do all these things. This is who needs to conduct it, who needs to review it. So you literally then can customize a lot of these aspects specifically for your company. And you know, you're not having to adopt the Safefood 360 way of doing things. You have your programs. You've already built them out. You've already said this is what we need to do. And that can then be set up inside that environment.
Okay, thanks. Question from Levin. What are the applications of the software to a cookie and cracker production plant? I guess it doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, it really doesn't matter where you're coming from in the industry, what sector you're in. Essentially you're able to set up those HACCP programs, all of your prerequisite programs, monitoring programs. So whatever your needs are, you are then able to set that up inside the software. And again, that whole raft of programs that you have, you're able to conduct that in that electronic environment. So whether you're coming from cookies and crackers or, you know, like a bakery sector, or you're in ingredients or flavors, the software is not geared towards any one particular sector.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Next question from Anika. Where is your backup located, and under which regulatory agency are you audited against, liable to? It's an interesting question, actually. Yeah. So is it all stored in the cloud, everybody's data?
Yeah, we're actually partnered with Microsoft. This is housed on Microsoft Azure. So you're able to, and that's some of the benefits to that, Anika, is that, you know, you're able to log into Safefood 360 from anywhere at any time. So, you know, it's not a really great selling point, but if you're the QA manager and you go on vacation and you're sitting on a beach, you actually, if you had your smartphone, you could log into your site to see what's going on. You'd be receiving those alerts. So, you know, you're always, have that ability to see what's happening at your facility. We are audited against, we have strict auditing that's occurring and all the time. And I think one of the main ones is we're SOC 2 compliant. So we do go through those rigorous penetration testing and security checking.
Okay, Sabrina, can you create programs in Safefood 360, or do you need to create outside the software and then upload, for example, HACCP or a threat assessment or something like that?
Yeah. Essentially, what you can do is Safefood 360. What's your up to speed on the software? You can't come in and buy the software at 7 o'clock in the morning and expect to know how to work it, complete it all by 10. There's quite a bit of training that would need to come in place, and we offer that with our professional services. They'll ensure you're the expert at your facility. But then, you might have those programs that you at the onset that gets moved into the system. You might have a mature program set up. And again, we'll go ahead and move that into the system for you. But then on maybe 6 months down the road, a year down the road, you want to add, well, now we just put in a new line. We got to create a new HACCP plan or what have you. The software allows you to go in and then set that up, and you can do that yourself because, again, you've been trained to do that. So absolutely, you don't need to come back to us every time you need to have some program edited, or you need to add another bullet point to your audit or what have you, you'll be able to do that.
Okay, and a question from Alan. I assume that your systems are easily reviewed on the go, because I guess FSMS should not be static, so it's easily to change things, etc., edit things.
Yeah, and you would be able to. The software is fully compliant with 21 CFR Part 11, number 1. So everything that happens in the software in that environment, it's tracked, it's logged, and you literally have an audit log of everything that happens, whether that's a document or it's actually one of the records, one of the programs that you have set up. Everything from the start to the present time is logged, and it's going to be, you'll be able to demonstrate to the auditor, to the regulator. I mean, this is my daisy chain of events that have happened there. But then just say you're in a monitoring program, you're looking at your weights or temperatures on the line, and there is an SPC program embedded into Safefood 360, and that's part of it. It's not an add-on, but that's actually part of that monitoring program. So based on that information, based on that data, you make that decision, well, we need to tighten the specs, or we need to loosen those specs, or whatever it may be. So you're absolutely able to then go in and edit those parameters in real time, and then that'll be changed for all future records that get created. But again, you're then going to also have that log. That the software is going to be letting you know, it's going to be tracking when that occurred. When did you do that, and who did it? And you can control who actually has the permission to do so. And you don't necessarily want the end user to be able to change their specifications, but it's actually that administrator, that QA manager, that top individual who's able to then do that. So I hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Another question about data security from Justice. How safe is the electronically collected data to risk like crushing data being stolen or malicious activity?
So the software, again, as this is housed on Azure, you are provided, or you're able to kind of benefit from that bank level security that's provided. But your data, it is backed up daily, and so you're not going to be without your data, and it's not going to disappear. So again, it is backed up daily, and you also have the opportunity, you have the ability to kind of do an Excel extraction of all the data. If you wanted to do like once a week, if your own in-house IT group wanted to do a backup as well, you're able to. I don't know many customers who actually do that, because their data is backed up and it is secure in this web environment.
Okay. Question from Christina. Does the software come with templates and SOPs? Is the info updated with new standard versions, etc.?
Okay. So the programs themselves, as you're going to create a program, again, let's just say 6 months after implementation, a year after implementation, you need to add a new calibration program. The software takes you through all of the steps, all of the information that you need to, as a manufacturer, that you need to set up and that you need to create. You have the data you want to, I need to set it up right against my specifications. You can customize that portion of it. But again, the software is going to lead you right through the steps that are required. We do not have SOPs like a kind of boilerplate documents. You just need to go in and change your company's logo or what have you. But we can offer assistance to an extent. But then the second part of that is the info updated with new standards versions, and I can say absolutely yes. So anytime that the standards change, because the software was built against those standards, anytime there are changes, one of these schemes, they go to a new standard or a new version, which is absolutely going to happen on a fairly regular basis. That flags a review on our end, and our team, our development team, they'll go through and they'll conduct a gap audit and of those changes. And if that requires any change to the system, or again, if the new scheme needs to be uploaded into the software so you have that available, we go ahead and do that. and that's actually done as part of the license. So there's no additional cost. There's no, we don't make the change and then send you an invoice and say, for $1,000 you can pass your next audit. But no, it's actually, the software is fully aligned with the standards today, and because we maintain it and because we make those changes and enhancements, it's going to be aligned next year and the year after, and in subsequent years.
Okay, from Carl. Is the software specific to QA? Does it include production planning, project management? Can it integrate with our inventory for us to recall?
Okay. And what I would say there is that it actually, you're able to have various units within your business utilize Safefood 360. So this is not just a toy that sits on the QA manager's lap, but there are like maintenance can utilize the software. We have a specific maintenance program, a module. There's the production can actually use this as part of they can include their checks that they might need to have, or sanitation, R&D, HR, so really you can kind of spread the cost of the software across different units, so that again, it's not all falling on the QA budget. I used to be a QA manager. I know it's the smallest budget in the company, no matter where you're at. So absolutely, you can adjust that. You can kind of spread that wealth out a little bit, if you will.
Chris? Would you believe we've run out of time?
I see that. I
can't believe it. So this has been the fastest almost 4 hours ever in my life, actually. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Sure, absolutely.
I've added a link in the sidebar there that links to a topic for this session, for your session. So if anybody has a question about software in general, food safety management system software, or Safefood 360, post it at that link, and Chris, if you can have a look, and perhaps Barry maybe, is that okay?
Yep.
So there's the link in the sidebar. Yep. So that's on the discussion forum. So thanks very much, Chris.
Hey, thank you.
Brilliant. I'll see you again soon.
Sure. Okay. Happy holidays. Yep. Take
care. Okay. One more time. Thank you to our sponsors of Food Safety Live. I'm going to play their videos, then we'll be back with Dr. David Rosenblatt, the final speaker, risk assessments in HACCP and HARPC. See you shortly.
The world of food has changed a lot in the last 100 years. But one thing that doesn't change? Ensuring the quality and safe handling of food. No matter what changes are yet to come, we're proud to always be on our clients' side, shaping the future of food today and tomorrow. AIB International. Ever onward.
Final session, sorry, everybody, is risk assessment in HACCP and HARPC with Dr. David Rosenblatt, I'm delighted to say. Last but not least, just want to give a quick intro, David, and then we'll get started.
Okay, I do the intro?
Yeah, just introduce yourself.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. I didn't realize I was the last one. Did I'm the last one?
Yes.
Okay, so I hope you've all been having a good time so far. I've just joined the conference. Unfortunately, I couldn't get away earlier, so I hope it's been a good show. I want to really thank Simon for inviting me once again to participate in an IFSQN webinar learning session. And my name is David. For those of you who have not heard me speak before, I am the learning director and Sher Consulting and Training. We are a consulting and training firm operating out of Israel. We provide services for food safety and quality, regulatory affairs, for environmental and health and safety. We are a subsidiary of Mirio NutriSciences, and we're 55 people who dedicate their career to making the world a better place and are passionate about making our food supply safer. And I'm just happy to have the opportunity to be able to share with you some of my 29 years of experience in risk assessments and food safety. And I'm ready to answer any questions.
Well, we're delighted to have you once again, David. It's always a pleasure to have you and get to pick your brains for a bit. So type your questions in the sidebar. HACCP, HARPC, we're talking about today, risk assessment. So just to kick us off, David, what is the difference between HACCP and HARPC? Pros and cons, benefits, just give us a bit of an overview.
Okay. First, I want to make it clear that the FDA does not appreciate us using the term HARPC, but it has become a common term to represent the hazard analysis and risk preventive controls. But we are dealing with the FSMA, the Food Safety and Modernization Act requirement to perform a food safety risk assessment based on identifying prevent risk and finding preventive controls. So HACCP, HACCP, has been around forever. It's the basis for all of our risk-based thinking in food safety and has been for many, many years. And HACCP is based on critical control points, and its focus is mostly on those points in our processes where control is being applied. And we have to identify these control points, these critical control points, and we have to make sure that they're being controlled 100% of the time. So maybe pasteurization or any thermal processing, or if we're sieving, or if we're filtering, or if we're reducing pH, whatever we're doing to protect food, that will be a critical control point. Now, over the years, we focused on HACCP and HACCP, and sort of a little bit, when I say us, the world, we've neglected the environmental hazards, the hazards that are originating from employee hygiene, from environmental cleanliness, from pests, from open doors and broken lights and dust. what we used to call GMPs, and we currently call PRPs, prerequisite programs. And what the Act has done is identified that there are controls that are as important around our process and not only in the process. So when the approach is to do hazard analysis and not look for critical control points, but look for what we now call risk preventive controls, which is a whole family of controls, including not only process controls, of course, process controls, the traditional CCPs still exist and will exist forever, but add on to them with the same level of seriousness, also preventive controls dealing with sanitation, with allergen management, with our supply chain management, purchasing and supplier inspections and so forth and so on. So what the HARPC approach has done, it's more or less aligned us with ISO 22000 thinking. ISO 22000 came out in 2005 with the concept of the OPRP, the Operational Prerequisite Program, which is the CCP of our environmental protection of our work environment. So it would be hand washing and sanitizing, it would be pest control, it would be what's going on. So it gives it and identifying those control measures that are outside of the process, which are as important. So this is aligned with that concept of not only having CCPs, but also having our OPRPs, or what the Americans will now call the risk preventive controls. So we have a package of control measures or risk preventive controls, depending on which language you're talking. If you're talking ISO, then they're control measures. If you're talking American, then they're risk preventive controls, same. And that package is what makes our food safety system, our food safety program is what we call. So that would be the short answer.
Okay, thanks, David. Justice, is there a specific risk assessment matrix for the food industry, or one has to go with what works for them?
The answer is B. One has to go with what works for them. Not only that, but it's interesting to say that while in ISO 22000, which represents the classical HACCP, and we're expected to have a methodology, and the standard does say that the organization must document their methodology for the risk assessment. The FSMA approach, which is represented by Hazard Analysis and Risk Preventive Controls, HARPC, does not require a specific methodology at all. So it is acceptable to express our evaluation of an identified risk by saying, well, this identified risk is significant or not significant based on our assessment that its severity is pretty low, its likelihood is maybe a little bit higher, without being definitive in our terms. In my opinion, it is worthwhile, and even I would expect for an organization that wants to do a proper risk assessment and get value from it to adopt a methodology, not to take advantage of the fact that FSMA is not really requiring that as a mandatory requirement, but rather being harder on ourselves and adopting a methodology. And there are many methodologies out there that are used by different companies. I've come to become more and more appreciative of methodologies that use a 5x5 matrix. That's my personal preference. And this has developed over the years. When I was younger, I liked the 3x3, and then went to 4x4, 3x4, and eventually graduated into 5x5, which is a mature way of doing a risk assessment. Some organizations go beyond that, and I think that's still a little overdoing it. I don't think you get much added value by doing a 10x10, like a failure mode effect analysis. They do 10x10. I don't think there's much added value there, but I do think there is value in a 5x5, especially high-risk organizations. Lower-risk organizations like packaging factories or factories that make packaging material, or maybe other types of lower-risk environments may do fine with a 3x3, just to put a framework for their risk assessment methodology. But the answer to Justice's question is B, you do what works for you. There's no specific methodology.
Okay, and on decision trees, Helmer, what decision tree would you recommend for use for CCP and OPRP categorization?
That's a great question, and decision trees are little by little becoming a thing of the past. We used to use them all the time. We even thought they were mandatory. And what a decision tree does is it gives us an opportunity to put data into a situation, run it through the tree, and see what the output is. And this works well if you're just looking for CCPs, because it's a process issue. So is there a step in the process in which this can be controlled, yes or no? If yes, is there another step in the process where we control later, yes or no? So it was a process issue. But once we put in the OPRP into our environment, then it's really difficult to put it through a decision tree. And it's more a question of asking, so I don't use decision trees anymore. Sometimes we do with some of our customers that we consult because it's important for them. So we have our decision trees that we use. But if the customer doesn't require it, we don't use them that much anymore. And even the new Codex Alimentarius 2020 version, and Codex is the ones that is the organization that introduced us to the first real tree in 1993, the famous Codex tree. Even they, in their new 2020 version, don't use a decision tree. ISO 22000 does not mention it. FSMA doesn't mention it. So it's an algorithm to make a decision. So in short, I don't. If I do recommend a tree, then it would be a simple one, saying, question number one: is there a control measure for this specific identified hazard? Yes or no? If no, go find one. We're done with that. Okay. If there is one, not is there one at this step? Is there one in general within our process? Not at this step. And if yes, is this control measure effective and monitorable? I just made up a word, but you understand what I'm saying. Can we monitor it? So it is effective. Has it been validated? And can it be monitored effectively? If yes, then we have our candidate to be a CCP or OPRP. And then we want to look, well, the next question would be, is there another one that may be also, we can able to monitor it and it's as effective? And then we have what we have a contest between them. And we'll choose the one that's better for us. It may be because we may choose the one that's earlier in the process, because we're talking about a hazard that's coming in from raw materials. We may choose one that's at the end of the process because we're looking at a hazard that's being introduced throughout the process. So it depends on that specific. And then once we decide that this is a control measure, then we'd have to ask what type is it. So if we're doing ISO 22000, we want to make sure, we want to find out if it's a CCP or OPRP. If we're doing FSMA, we want to make sure, is this a risk preventive control in the process? Is this a risk preventive control for allergen control? Is this a risk preventive control dealing with sanitation? Is this a risk preventive control dealing with supply chain, or is it something else? And then we'll categorize it as such.
Okay, brilliant. Helmer, could a supplier management program be a CCP or OPRP? What pros and cons would you say there is about that program being one or the other?
Okay, that's a great question. So first of all, if we're doing HARPC, there is a risk preventive control called supply chain risk preventive control. And the law does state what that includes. That would include a supplier audit, receiving records, going over certificates of analysis, doing laboratory examinations, and all that would be according to the risk. So it's not the package is chosen. You choose from that list of things what you want to do, what's best for you. According to the law, if the hazard that has been identified can cause seriously adverse health effects or death, then we must perform supplier audits once a year. This is a mandatory requirement. So that's the FSMA HARPC way of looking at it. If we're looking at it from a HACCP point of view, ISO 22000, then it would depend. If we're talking about a package of management supplier, which means choosing the right supplier, requesting that supplier has a third-party certification scheme, requiring that supplier is audited at a certain basis, and not receiving product that does not meet that standard, then we can call it an OPRP, definitely, because it is an operational prerequisite program. If we're using tools like testing every batch as it enters, for instance, we do this with antibiotics and milk when we receive raw milk at dairy factories. Or we do this with in pet food factories where we use corn. We'll often do screening for aflatoxins at the entrance, and that is considered a supplier management program because we are testing our incoming goods, but that would be a CCP because we're controlling it 100% as it's entering. Sometimes we may ask for paperwork as a CCP. So this would be something that the product is stopped as it comes into the plant. Wait, you're not allowed to come in right now. Show me your paperwork, show me your COA, show me your phytosanitary certificate or your veterinary health certificate, whatever I'm requiring. And if everything's in order, then you're invited to come into our factory. You are accepted. That can also be considered a CCP in some organizations. Or if it's called an OPRP, it's also acceptable because it's not a real step in the process. It's more of something that's going on as it's coming in. So it's a matter of interpretation, but as long as it's being managed for 100%. If we are doing a random testing once every 10 shipments, once every 5 shipments, once a year, all those things will be considered regular verification activities and cannot be considered a risk preventive control or a CCP or PRP because they're not covering every single shipment. That's a different story. So I hope I answered that.
Yeah, you did. Question from Nate. Which acronyms would you recommend and which would you say food plants should avoid in 2021 and 2022?
Acronyms?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting question. I'm not sure what Nate means, but we don't use GMP anymore. GMP is phasing out. HACCP, HACCP is not being used anymore in most organizations. So these are acronyms that are
it's okay. Ignore that.
These are acronyms that are failed. GMP is now used mainly for pharmaceutical. They still maintain their GMPs, their CGMPs. FDA just used GMP as a term in their regulations for the prerequisite programs, but they also call them PRPs, prerequisite programs. ISO 22000 has stated explicitly that PRP replaces GMP and GAP and GT, GDP, GRP, all the GPs, the GWPs, has replaced them all. They're all PRPs. And HACCP is really not mentioned in ISO 22000. It's not mentioned in FSMA. It's now considered to be replaced by what we call risk-based thinking, RBT. That's the new acronym of the day, risk-based thinking. And risk-based thinking is a much wider approach. It's not only risk-based thinking, not only has critical control points, not only our processes, but thinking in a wider scale. What could go wrong? So what could go wrong? What if we have for instance, a case of intentional adulteration? That would be part of our risk-based thinking, or vulnerability and food fraud would be within the framework of our risk-based thinking. So it's now a wider way of thinking. And this has come into play because ISO 9001, which is not food, but it's everything, in 2015 introduced risk-based thinking as a mandatory requirement. And it actually stopped requiring preventive actions. So it used to be everybody had to do preventive actions. That was item 8.5.3 of ISO 9001. That was nobody knew how to deal with that clause. And now ISO in 2015 said, forget preventive actions, do risk assessments, do what we call a risks and opportunities, and do that assessment instead. So that's your risk-based thinking to prevent things from happening. And HACCP, what we used to call HACCP, the risk assessment for food, or the preventive controls risk assessment for human food that the FDA requires, is a replacement of that acronym of HACCP. And it's still, I must say, HACCP, it will be with us forever. It is it's an iconic acronym. It's still required by law in many countries and many industries, but it is phasing out as a concept.
RBT shorter. Another question from Nate. Is there a central source you recommend to look up the risk of particular hazards?
Yes, there is. And actually, I think we did a webinar on that once, Simon. One of our Food Safety Fridays.
I think we did,
was called Great Resources for Food Safety Teams.
It was.
I recommend revisiting that. Look for it on YouTube on the site. And I did mention a lot of resources. The best one out there right now, one of the nicest ones out there, is a document that has been published by FDA as part of the FSMA initiative, and it is an annex to the recommendations on how to implement a food safety management system according to FSMA. And that annex is a enormous 300-page table that has the major hazards in columns and every single kind of food they could think of in the rows. And you just go and you just look for your food in the row, and both finished products and ingredients. And then you look at you find your food in your category. Say you're making a chocolate biscuit. So you put chocolate biscuits and you look at the rows and see which rows are marked. So it would say aflatoxin, yes. Dioxins, no. So it has the different hazards, and it has that, and then one of the tables has it for microbiological hazards, and there's another table for chemical hazards. So that's really neat. And they also have a third table for situations like undeclared ingredient and things like that are not the actual presence of a hazard, but something that could go wrong. So it's a really neat reference, and I like it. But there are others. So do go. I recommend to that webinar. It's 45 minutes of information and worth going through, listening to. Yeah. Actually, you know what it was? It was not a webinar, so it's going to be more difficult to find. It was a lecture in one of the FSLs, Food Safety Live sessions.
Right.
So it's in there within that YouTube. So you have to look for it.
I'll dig it out and circulate it. A couple of questions going back to the 5x5 matrix that you discussed. What would be the severity and probability on those 5?
Okay, so usually you'd have 5 levels of severity starting from, and this is important. Let's start with probability, with likelihood, or occurrence, as it's called in risk-based thinking. So it would be from 1, the lowest one would be theoretical. So it could happen theoretically, but it hasn't. So it would give the lowest score. And this is an important one. It's really an important, and usually we don't see it because we don't have enough levels to allow ourselves to have that 1, which is because when we're doing a risk assessment and we have our team, and our team is going through with their minds and thinking, what could go wrong? Sometimes people come up with the craziest stuff. And we're going to either document it or not document it. If we document the crazy idea that what could go wrong, and then sometimes these are out there, we don't, well, if we say, no, come on, John, that's stupid. What's with you? Where'd you get that from? Then that participant in our team is going to think to himself, well, they don't like my ideas. I'm not going to say anything anymore. And maybe the next thing he would have said is our next recall that we hadn't thought of. So we don't want to lose that person. So we want to give them the freedom of saying things that are really out there. Because we give it it's legitimate. But what if that identified hazard scenario, if it does happen, and it's not going to apparently, but if it were to happen, it would be a catastrophe. So the severity would be very high. So in most matrices, the highest severity is always red or always requires a control measure regardless of the likelihood. Because we could say, we're not going to have anybody die ever, no matter how unlikely this event is. So it'll always be red. So if we do respect that idea, then we're stuck with CCPs that are ridiculous. But because the methodology required it, because we can't. So either we have to say to the person, we're not going to write that down, and then we're losing that person's contribution. So if we have a level of severity that is of likelihood that we call theoretical, then we've documented it. We have an opportunity later on to think about it and to assess it and say, okay, how likely is this specific idea to happen? Let's go through it. Let's think about it. Maybe it's not that crazy. Hey, and then it's worth thinking about. Maybe it's crazy and it's a theoretical, so it's documented and it's given a 1. So I like the 1. On the other hand, what we do with the 2, 3, 4, and 5 is try to put dates on it. So it would be every organization does it differently. So if you go to the next one, it would be very, very rare, occurs once every 10 years or less. And then we'd have one that occurs once every 5 years, once every year, once a month, and can happen once a week. So we try to put a timeline on these to try to put them into how often would be expected to happen. That would be the 5 levels of likelihood. Severity will start with number 1, which we use for those food safety hazards that don't really cause any medical issue, but are still unacceptable, like hair, pieces of insects, pieces of rubber, things that are disgusting, more or less. And they are worthy of being included in our risk assessment, even though they're quality issues, because they have an impact on how people react to our food. So what I usually tell my customers when I consult is, if it's something that can cause a consumer to want to throw up, to vomit, to be so disgusted that it would cause them actual physical reaction, put it into the risk assessment, but give it a low level of severity. Because put it where it's, because nothing is really going to happen to you if you swallow an ant. You're going to be fine, no matter what. But people don't want ants in their food, and they don't see that as the same type of foreign body as if they would have had, I don't know, pieces of cereal. One of them is a little different color, which is also a foreign matter, but it's not the same reaction. So we do use foreign bodies that are not hazardous. And then when we go up to level 2 of severity, then it would be something that actually causes a medical issue, but it would be a slight medical issue. And we try to put that into context and write down examples. So something that could cause maybe dizziness or a headache or a local reaction, or maybe something that could cause discomfort if you bite on it, like a pebble, or maybe something that's not a foreign body, that's not you won't get cut by it. It won't cause a laceration, but it can break a tooth. And then when you go up to 3 is for most of our regular hazards that cause vomiting, diarrhea, can cause injuries that are more serious than a little foreign body. And we give those in. For instance, we might put Bacillus cereus in that category, or or Clostridium perfringens, which do cause the stress and they cause a disease, but it's not something that doesn't cause irreversible damage, and it's over quickly. And then level 4 is for the real diseases, the serious stuff that happens. That really put you in the hospital. Really, you get really sick. It could be in level 4, you'd put things like norovirus, Staph aureus, Staphylococcus aureus poisoning, which are these are things that are dramatic. There's hospitalization involved, sometimes big outbreaks. We'd include their foreign bodies that are sharp, that could cause lacerations and things like that, or maybe chemicals that can cause burning, like caustic soda, and that gets into food, but they're not fatal. And then for level 5, the highest level of severity, we put things that can kill you. So that's where we put things that can kill you. E. coli of the STEC group, hepatitis A, Listeria monocytogenes, salmonellosis, our killers that are typically and allergens, undeclared allergens would be in that category. So it's worthy. And if we're talking about pet food, we'd also put aflatoxicosis in there, or mycotoxins, which cause death in pets, but less in humans. And so it would be an issue if it was a baby food. That category would include Chronobacter sakazaki, the deadly bacteria that's relevant only for little tiny babies. So it would be an issue. That would be that. So, and there's always a question where to put the things that can cause long-term. Maybe they're carcinogens. Like where do we put dioxins? Where do we put acrylamide? Where do we put heavy metals? So that would be a question of the organization's decision. Usually they'd be in the middle somewhere, because they're not really going to cause. They have to be over a long time. But it would depend on the food and on the intended audience, the intended consumers. So I hope
that was brilliant explanation. Time for just a couple more quick questions because we're running out. Helmut, what methodology do you use if not the decision tree?
Common sense criteria. Is the control measure valid? Has it been validated? Is it effective? Yes or no? And can it be monitored in a way that we can react in a timely manner in case something goes wrong? And those two are the two. And if it does meet those two criteria, then it is worthy of being considered to be a control measure. And then we have to see if we have something better or not. So, and again, if we don't have a control measure at all that answers those criteria, maybe we can do synergy, which is also not, it can't be, you can't do this in a decision tree. So you have to think, maybe if I have 2 control measures that are operating simultaneously, so maybe I want to lower my pH to a level where it's not safe at all, but it's safer, and add on to that a level of potassium sorbate as a preservative, but not at a level high enough to protect the product all the time, but because there's synergy between pH and potassium sorbate two of them together are considered to be an effective control measure. So that's the type of thinking that we're going through instead of decision tree.
Final one, difference between OPRP and PRP from Venice.
Okay, these are clearly defined in ISO 22000 2018. PRP are our prerequisite programs. These are our GMPs that you used to call them. They're generic, they're prerequisites. And the OPRP is a control measure. So it is an outcome of our risk assessment, and it's chosen to be the control measure to control a significant hazard. Often it will be a PRP that has become, that we've enhanced for that purpose, which is why it received the name OPRP in the original name of OPRP, because it's an operational prerequisite program. We've enhanced it because it is now used to control significant hazard. So like say hand washing and sanitizing our hands is a clear PRP. It's a prerequisite program. Everybody has to wash their hands. But if you have a group of people in a high care area where hand washing is critical and sanitizing their hands is critical to public safety, not just any food handler that has to wash their hands, but it has been identified in the risk assessment as being a significant risk, then that PRP has been enhanced and will become an operational PRP. That's my explanation.
Thanks, David. We've got to end it here. Brilliant. Thanks for your time. I've put the link to your session topic that goes to the forum. So if we've missed any questions, please go and post